At the Draker family's cradle, there's one rule nobody talks about: the evaluation fight called Pankradon has no rules. Students get injured, get crippled, sometimes worse. And every single year, they always pair our boy Zeke with the same cousin, Leon, the freckled prodigy who beat him until he begged in his past life. Leon steps in already smiling, pats Zeke on the head like a dog. Trash like you shouldn't even be up here. Before the instructor even opens his mouth to start the match, Zeke critical strikes him straight in the face. Leon hits the ground. The crowd goes silent. The instructor loses it. I hadn't announced the start. Zeke just looks at him dead-eyed. No one shouts ready on a battlefield. The instructor feels actual bloodlust radiating off this 12-year-old and decides to shut up immediately. Leon gets up. Fight starts for real. He rushes, tries an MMA takedown, and his brain just stops working. He doesn't even know what happened. Zeke slipped out, Muay Thai kicked him into next week, grabbed his counter, and slammed him so hard the dust hadn't settled before Zeke was already sitting on top of him finishing the job. The instructor watching couldn't say a word. Is this really the same kid I knew? This is a Dragon Slayer's peerless regression. And Leon was just the warm-up. Icy winds howl across a desolate, snow-covered mountain range where the silence is heavy with the scent of blood. The Awakener, our protagonist, stands battered and broken in the middle of an inescapable encirclement. His enemies aren't just here for his life. They're demanding the location of a hidden ancient relic. Honestly, looking at those jagged peaks and the sheer number of soldiers, it's the perfect place for a final stand, or a total massacre. The Awakener coughs up a thick spray of crimson, his face smeared with grime, yet a chilling smirk forms on his lips. He stares at the elite soldiers and calls them absolute idiots for expecting him to talk. He asks them a simple question: would you just tell that to others if you were me? It's a top-tier provocation, and you can tell it hits a nerve because his captors look like they're ready to snap. One of the lead enforcers pulls out a glowing communication crystal, confirming to his superiors that they've finally cornered the Northern Phantom. They're genuinely stunned that he's still conscious, especially since his arm has been brutally severed in the struggle. These guys are obsessed with the relic the Emperor is hunting, and they're starting to realize that the Awakener is far more stubborn than any normal man should be. Seriously, the sheer willpower it takes to stay upright after losing a limb is insane. We see a close-up of the Awakener's eyes, half hidden behind matted, dark hair as he leans on his massive sword for support. The soldiers decide they aren't going to wait for the main squad to arrive. They want to pay him back for the days of suffering he's put them through. They tell him to brace himself, promising they won't stop the torture until he's desperately begging for death. This is getting dark fast, and it's clear they intend to break him piece by piece. The elite cadre begins to bicker over who gets to strike the first blow, their faces twisted with the kind of arrogance only found in people who think they've already won. One of them steps forward with a cold, predatory grin, ready to begin the execution. But then, a sudden, violent spray of blood erupts, painting the white snow a deep, sickening red. Is this the end for our hero, or is the system about to pull him back from the brink of the abyss? Stick around, because this is where everything changes. Zeke's adult form stands tall, his eyes burning with a terrifying, ethereal purple glow. He's clutching his chest as if his soul itself is being rewritten by the system's merge. You can practically feel the weight of his years of regret finally turning into raw, unadulterated power. Cold text boxes appear, peeling back the layers of a truly brutal past. It turns out, Zeke Draker was known as the first failed Awakener in the history of his entire lineage. Imagine the shame of being born into the legendary Dragon Slayer household, where power is the only currency, and not being able to manifest a single spark of aura. They didn't just overlook him, they treated him like absolute trash and threw him out of the family like he meant nothing. Splinters of ice and light dance around as he reflects on the path he took to stay alive. Zeke did every dirty, desperate, and painful thing he could just to see the sun rise for one more day. It's honestly hard not to feel for the guy when you realize he's been fighting a losing battle since the moment he was born. A soft purple light illuminates a quote about the supposed emptiness of chasing raw power. Someone once told him that if all he pursued was strength, he'd eventually end up with nothing in his hands. It sounds like the kind of noble, poetic advice a main character in a fairy tale would follow, doesn't it? Zeke's gloved hand snapped shut in the darkness, catching a falling coin with surgical precision. He scoffs at the memory, calling the whole strength is nothing sentiment absolute bullshit. In his world, phrases like that are just a luxury for people who have never actually been hunted like prey. A heavy shadow falls over his face, leaving only a single, glowing eye and a wicked, predatory grin visible. He looks less like a hero and more like a man who has finally stopped trying to be good and started focusing on being deadly. This is the exact moment the underdog officially decides to bite back. Two silhouettes walk through a snowy haze as Zeke's final, bitter realization hits home. He knows those pretty lies about strength not being everything are only ever spoken by the people who already have it. Now that he's been given a second chance, he isn't going to listen to wise words. He's going to become the monster that the strong should actually be afraid of. A stark white text box appears over a desolate, gray landscape, continuing the cold philosophy of this survival of the fittest world. In this reality, those who are weak don't just lose, they get trampled into the mud by the strong without a second thought. Every bit of status, pride, or property they have is destined to be stolen by someone more powerful. It's a brutal, honest assessment of the life Zeke is determined to leave behind. Blood geysers into the air as a blade rips through a warrior's chest in a violent, messy spray of red. Zeke's face is a mask of pure grit and dried blood, his eyes narrowed as he pushes through the physical agony of what looks like a losing battle. He's at his absolute limit here, barely clinging to his consciousness while the world around him collapses. Man, you can almost feel the freezing cold and the sting of those wounds just by looking at him. Heavy boots thud against the frozen ground as Zeke stands in the center of a crater, his hand glowing with an eerie, violet light. The soldiers watching from the sidelines are frozen in pure shock because they just witnessed Zeke literally attach his own severed arm back onto his shoulder. What? They whisper, their voices trembling with a mix of confusion and genuine fear. Talk about a, did that just happen, moment. That's some god-tier regeneration right there. Two hooded members of the elite cadre watch the carnage from the shadows, their eyes filled with visible contempt. They label Zeke as an irregular, calling the sight of his survival gross and completely unnatural. Zeke isn't waiting for their approval or a fair fight, though. He lunges back into the fray with a terrifying burst of speed. He knows that in a place like this, being normal is just another way of saying you're ready to die. Sharp, violet energy trails follow Zeke's blade as he unleashes a flurry of strikes that tear through the very air. One by one, the shadows of his enemies are extinguished in a display of raw, draconic power that defies everything these trainees were ever taught. As the chaos finally fades, we see Zeke kneeling in the center of a grim graveyard, his head bowed among dozens of discarded swords. He is the sole survivor of this massacre, a silent ghost in a field of red. It's a heavy visual, reminding us that in this world, victory always smells like iron and death. Now the real question is, who's next on his list? A hand coated in thick, dark blood reaches out, fingers twitching as they lose their grip on reality. Zeke is barely holding on, leaning against the cold steel of a dozen swords while the life drains out of him in the middle of this frozen wasteland. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing he's reached his limit without finishing the one thing he lived for. Revenge. Seeing a legend like him reduced to this is just brutal. In his palm, a strange, jagged shard begins to glow with a violent, rhythmic light as if it's feeding on his final breath. Zeke's head falls back, a final, pained apology for a girl named Alicia escaping his blood-stained lips as his vision begins to fade. Honestly, the way he says her name, you can tell this loss cuts deeper than any physical wound. But who is Alicia, and why is she his final thought? A majestic, golden dragon spirit surges out of the shard, its ethereal scales shimmering with a power that feels older than the world itself. A system prompt flashes across the screen, declaring that Zeke's unbreakable will has triggered an ancient awakening. Finally, he's getting the help he deserves, but this doesn't look like a standard power-up. Zeke's battered body is lifted into the air, surrounded by a swirling storm of golden mana and floating debris. The system doesn't pull any punches, addressing him formally by his full name, Zeke Draker, do you agree? It's a life-or-death contract offered at the very edge of the grave, and the tension is absolutely suffocating. Zeke looks up through half-lidded eyes, convinced that these voices are just the final, random nonsense his brain is making up before he kicks the bucket. Little does he know, the system interprets his state as a total confirmation and locks in the Awakener's agreement. The screen starts flashing with warnings about an irreversible power being unleashed, and you just know things are about to get crazy. A series of blue boxes stack on top of each other, initiating a heavy, final countdown starting from 5. You can practically feel the air vibrating as the numbers drop. 4, 3, 2, the world is literally blurring out of existence. He wanted a second chance, and it looks like the universe is about to give him exactly that. Now, the real question is, how far back is he going? The gold embossed title card fades away to reveal a pair of wide, youthful eyes staring into the void. The Awakener has officially regained consciousness, but the face staring back at him from the reflection is decades younger than it should be. It's a complete shock to the system, seeing a version of himself he thought was buried long ago under layers of scars and regret. He lifts his small, unblemished hands, turning them over slowly as if they belong to a complete stranger. He's really back in the past, yet the phantom pain of that final battle still lingers in his nerves. He can practically feel the cold, jagged steel of the sword that was stuck in his stomach. It's a chilling reminder that while his body is fresh and new, his mind is still carrying the weight of a violent death. The camera pulls back to show him lying on a thin mattress in a Spartan, stone-walled dormitory. This is the Cradle, the Draker household's brutal training institution where the weak are weeded out like common garden weeds. It's a grim, gray fortress designed to break children until only the most heartless weapons remain, and he's right back at the start of the meat grinder. A massive, dark dragon spreads its wings across a blood-red sky in a flash of historical memory. The Draker family is legendary, known as one of the 3 great transcendent households that rule the world through sheer, overwhelming force. You can see the absolute madness and power in the glowing eyes of their ancestors. These people weren't just warriors, they were the living incarnations of the dragon's wrath. A phalanx of knights with piercing, purple eyes stands in formation behind a majestic crest of crossed swords and a dragon's shield. These are the elite descendants who successfully awakened their high-level auras, becoming the god-tier conquerors of the household. This is the impossible standard he was always measured against in his first life, and usually, he was the one left in the dirt. A faint, dangerous smirk plays on the awakener's lips as a blue notification window pings into existence right before his eyes. The administration system is restarting, which means his adult knowledge and the elder dragons are finally syncing up with this younger body. He sits up and scans the room with a sharp, calculating gaze that no child should ever possess. The nightmare of his childhood is starting all over again, but this time, he's the one holding all the cards. A series of blue system windows chime into existence. The screen confirms that the soul of the awakener is now 100% aligned with the will of the elder dragon. The system even greets him personally, saying, "Nice to meet you, Zeke Draker." Getting a direct shout-out from the system itself. That's how you know things are about to get serious. Zeke Draker stares at the glowing holographic interface with a look of pure shock. He wonders if some kind of ancient artifact just activated, but the status window reveals something much more interesting. His class is listed as a rare healer, but his title is the one who received the blessing of the ancient dragon. Usually, healers are just backline support, but with those physical combat skills like precise stab and critical strike, Zeke is looking more like a combat medic from hell. Zeke swipes through the floating menus with his small, trembling hands. He realizes he can navigate this interface just like a touchscreen video, and he finds something hidden in the submenus. There's a section for draconian skills, but it's currently locked behind a point requirement. He recognizes the draconic language from stories he heard in his previous life. If he can unlock these, his healer class is going to be anything but ordinary. A dark, menacing silhouette of a woman with glowing eyes looms over Zeke's memories. This was his master, a woman who pushed him to the absolute brink of death during his original training. She's the one who taught him that being a healer isn't about being kind, it's about having the durability to survive a slaughter. Her voice echoes in his head, mocking the idea that he'd use healing for anything other than outlasting his enemies. Talk about a tough love approach. Zeke focuses his internal energy, causing his small hands to emit a soft, pulsing light. He decides to test his status immediately to see if he can truly manifest his powers this early. In the original timeline, he didn't even unlock the healer class until he was in his 20s, long after the Ether Hall was opened. But here he is, a mere child, already wielding the power of a high-tier awakener. He's already years ahead of schedule, and the world has no idea what's coming. Zeke stands enveloped in a violent swirl of purple mana that licks the air like flames. He slowly opens his eyes, and they're glowing with that unmistakable, piercing violet light of the elder dragon. He lets out a small, confident smirk, whispering to himself that he knew it would work. This is the ultimate confirmation. His peak power isn't just a memory, it's physically here, surging through his veins. Honestly, seeing that predatory look on a kid's face, it's kind of terrifying. Zeke looks down at his small, unscarred hands as the aura fades back into his skin. He acknowledges the reality that he's returned to the past with every single skill and tactical memory from his previous life. Compared to the pathetic, fearful weakling he was in the original timeline, he's starting this journey in a much more advantageous position. He's essentially a tactical nuke hidden in the body of a child. If I were his future enemies, I'd be sweating bullets right about now. A sharp, rhythmic knock at the wooden door suddenly echoes through the room. A formal voice calls out from the hallway, addressing him as Master Zeke and asking for permission to enter. Zeke completely loses his cool, frantically clutching his hair as he realizes he needs to hide the evidence of his awakening. He shouts for them to wait, his face twisting into a panicked, chibi expression as he tries to switch back into helpless kid mode. Talk about a mood killer. He was just having his big, god-tier moment. A stern man dressed in a sharp formal suit and a monocle steps into the room, radiating an air of pure authority. He looks Zeke dead in the eye and asks what on earth he could possibly be thinking by delaying him. Zeke stammers, trying to play the part of the confused child by asking what he's supposed to be prepared for. The man's silhouette towers over him, his gaze sharpening as he asks if Zeke is seriously asking that question. This guy definitely isn't buying the act. The real question is, what exactly was the bold Zeke supposed to be doing today that has this guy so on edge? A menacing shadow with glowing purple eyes looms over Zeke's memories. Zeke realizes that even with his adult soul, the sheer terror of Decker is literally engraved into his DNA. It's a primal fear he can't just shake off. But then, a blue system interface flickers to life, announcing the activation of the class skill, Composed Mind. Suddenly, the cold sweat and trembling stop as a wave of artificial calm washes over him. Honestly, having a system to manage your PTSD is a total cheat code. Zeke looks up from his bed, watching a blue aura settle around his head. He notes how incredibly convenient it is for the skill to trigger automatically whenever his heart rate spikes. Decker's massive, gloved hand remains outstretched, his silhouette blocking the light as he sighs in frustration. He demands to know if Zeke is even listening to him. Zeke doesn't miss a beat, replying with a calm, of course. He's finally got his poker face back. Fresh blood spatters across a gray stone floor in a jagged, violent pattern. Zeke mentions the evaluation test, Pancration, and the mood in the room turns ice cold. We see a flashback of a younger Zeke, battered and bruised, staring at the ground with tears of frustration and pain. This isn't just a test, it's the moment that defined his first life's misery. You can tell just by looking at him, that kid was at his breaking point. We learn that every child born as a Draker is forced into a training system called the Cradle, starting at just 7 years old. The screen pans over a massive, fortress-like academy where these kids endure 5 years of basic training. They're taught swordsmanship and the brutal art of Pancration, which is basically combat without a single rule. It's a literal meat grinder for children. A student with glowing eyes slowly draws a sword, the steel humming with killing intent. The narrator explains that in these fights, students pick their opponents, and since there are no rules, many leave with permanent injuries, if they even leave alive. Finally, a massive, crowned silhouette looks down upon 5 small trainees standing in the palm of a giant hand. This competition determines their entire future and which class they'll be sorted into. The real question is, who is Zeke going to target first to change his fate? A blood-red backdrop fades into a pile of struggling trainees. These kids have no choice but to fight with everything they have just to see tomorrow. The scale of the Pancration arena is massive, and you can feel the weight of the final evaluation pressing down on everyone. This is where the weak are finally discarded. Head instructor Pan Mark stands tall on the podium, overlooking the rows of children. He acknowledges their high spirits with a gaze that's as cold as ice. Honestly, this guy looks like he'd execute a student for just blinking the wrong way. The pressure in the air is thick enough to choke on. The trainees scream their loyalty in a unified roar that shakes the walls. But even in the middle of that, Zeke is surrounded by toxic whispers from the other students. They're mocking him for being a direct bloodline failure who should have run away after last year's humiliation. It's crazy how fast they've written him off before the fight even starts. Zeke stands perfectly still, thinking to himself that he can hear every single insult they're throwing. Pan Mark's voice cuts through the noise, calling for Aaron and Gata to step into the center. These two don't even hesitate, leaping down into the arena with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you're the predator. Dust kicks up as the combatants hit the stone floor with a heavy thud. The signal to begin echoes through the stadium, and the atmosphere shifts from tense to lethal in a split second. One trainee rushes forward, a literal blur of desperate motion. He's going for the kill right out of the gate. A trainee lunges with his eyes wide, fueled by pure survival instinct. But a heavy, black boot snaps upward with blinding speed, catching him squarely in the jaw. Blood sprays across the frame as the impact sends him reeling. Man, that's not just a hit, that's a statement. The question is, can anyone actually stand up to this kind of raw violence? The training supervisor sits high in the bleachers, looking down at the carnage with total indifference. He coldly explains that a lack of a proper defense position is the only reason for such a pathetic defeat. The Awakener looks down at his hands, remembering how this exact speech used to leave him paralyzed with fear. It's a strange feeling, being back in the body that used to tremble at every word this man spoke. A wide view of the training grounds shows the scale of the facility, but the Awakener's internal monologue is far from intimidated. He realizes that compared to what he's faced as an adult, these prodigies are actually nothing. That's when Decker steps into the light, cracking his knuckles with a sadistic, glowing-eyed smirk. This guy was the undisputed king of the hill back then, and he clearly hasn't lost his appetite for bullying. Heavy footsteps ring out across the stone floor as the next round of training is called to order. Decker walks right up to the Awakener, his face twisted into a mockingly friendly grin. He taunts the boy, saying he must not have had enough of his attention from the previous year. You can just feel the arrogance coming off him in waves. He really thinks he's still the apex predator in this room. A dark, grainy memory flashes back to a time when Decker loomed over the Awakener's smaller, bloodier frame. In the past, Decker called him a parasite and told him to beg for his life if he wanted to keep breathing. We see the young version of our protagonist sobbing and broken on the floor, a victim of relentless cruelty. It's a brutal reminder of why this regression is so important, this isn't just about power, it's about pure, unfiltered revenge. Back in the present, the Awakener stands tall, analyzing the situation with a cold, tactical mind. He's certain that Decker pulled strings within the facility just to ensure they be matched up again for more training. The worst part of it all, Decker is actually his cousin. Family usually looks out for each other, but in this world, blood relations just mean you know exactly where to twist the knife. For menacing silhouettes emerge from the darkness, their eyes glowing with a lethal, orange intensity. These are the true monsters of the facility, the elite cadre that dominated the hierarchy in the original timeline. The Awakener has the Elder Dragon's power, but he's currently surrounded by the very people who destroyed his first life. The question is, can he take them all down before they realize the parasite has finally grown teeth? This is where the real war begins. Silhouetted figures kick a small boy curled into a ball on the dirt. This is Zeke Draker's past, a cycle of being the parasite that everyone in the Draker household felt entitled to crush. It's a brutal reminder of why he's regressed and why he's so focused on strength now. Cut to the present, and Zeke's violet eyes are cold, staring down the very bullies who haven't realized the world has shifted. Decker is still talking trash, calling him inferior as if it's just a basic law of nature. Honestly, the guy has no clue he's about to hit a brick wall. Zeke stands tall, calmly adjusting his trainee uniform while the insults fly. He reflects on how long it's been since he had to listen to this garbage, and you can tell he's reaching his limit. The question is, can he actually keep his cool in front of the instructors? He gives a final warning, telling Decker he won't be nice if he's called that name again. It's the kind of threat that should make your skin crawl, but Decker is way too arrogant to feel the danger. Decker snarls and grabs Zeke by the hair, forcing his head back with a look of pure disgust. He's offended that the inferior piece of shit is even talking back, but Zeke doesn't even flinch at the pain. Suddenly, the air gets heavy as Zeke's fist starts to glow with a terrifying, jagged violet light. System alerts scream across the vision, critical strike is active. This isn't just a playground scrap anymore, it's a high-level mana execution. Blood splatters the floor as Decker's screams fill the entire training hall. Zeke's counterattack connects with bone-shattering force, instantly turning the bully's face into a bloody mess. It's absolute silence from the crowd as they process what just happened. The crazy part is, Zeke actually looks a bit stunned himself, realizing his mana is reacting to his instincts faster than he can track. He only meant to knock Decker out, but his power is behaving like a wild beast he can't quite cage yet. If he's already this lethal, what's going to happen when he actually tries? Pan Mark screams in a rage, his face contorted as he yells that Zeke attacked before the signal. The instructor is absolutely livid that Zeke just shattered the academy's formal rules, but Zeke isn't even listening. He's staring down at his hands, thinking about how there are no ready, set, go signals on a real battlefield. In Zeke's eyes, the one who hits first is the one who survives, and he's done playing by their fair-weather rules. Honestly, he's not wrong. Honor doesn't keep you alive in a ditch. A tight close-up shows Pan Mark's eyes bulging in shock at the boy's audacity. He's never seen a trainee show this much blatant disrespect, especially not the kid everyone used to call a parasite. He rushes over to the groveling Decker, checking if the boy is even conscious, but Decker manages to gasp out that he's fine. He's shaking like a leaf, but his ego won't let him quit in front of the entire Draker household. Decker staggers back to his feet, blood dripping from his chin and splashing onto the cold arena floor. He's trembling with a mix of a concussion and pure, unadulterated hatred as he begs for the fight to officially begin. We get this insane split-screen shot where Zeke's eyes are glowing a piercing, calm violet, while Decker's have turned a manic, bloodshot red. Decker is mentally screaming for Zeke's death, but Zeke just looks bored. Pan Mark raises his hand, the crowd holding its breath as he calls for them to get ready. The silence in the arena is heavy, the tension peaking right before he drops his hand with a thunderous, begin. This is it. Now that it's official, everyone expects Decker to finally bulldoze through the smaller boy. Decker lunges forward like a beast possessed, his silhouette a blur of raw, unrefined power. He's putting every ounce of his weight into this charge, but then we see Zeke's reaction. He just blinks, a single, what, escaping his lips as he watches Decker move. The crazy part is, to Zeke's heightened senses, the bully looks like he's moving through molasses. Decker unleashes a desperate barrage of punches, his fists slamming into Zeke's forearms with a series of dull thuds. Zeke stands his ground, taking the hits head on, and he realizes something that changes the entire dynamic of the fight. He was actually worried about Decker's strength, but these punches, they don't hurt at all. He realizes that as long as he keeps his guard up, this monster isn't even a threat. It's a complete reality check for both of them. Zeke coils his body like a spring, preparing a precise left-hand counter. Decker lunges forward with a massive punch that would have ended the old Zeke, but now, it's just too obvious. Zeke ducks under the strike with zero effort, making the Academy's top bully look like a total amateur. Honestly, seeing a child move with the grace of a veteran warrior is kind of terrifying. The air thickens with dust as the two boys clash in a brutal, high-speed exchange. Decker is completely unhinged, screaming for Zeke to die while calling him an inferior piece of shit. He's swinging with enough force to crack bone, but his rage is making him incredibly sloppy. It's like watching a massive, angry bull try to gore a ghost. It just isn't working. Zeke's violet eyes flash with a cold, draconian light as he locks onto a fatal opening. Suddenly, the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor rings out, followed by a thick cloud of stone dust. The crowd is staring in total disbelief, collectively wondering what the hell just happened. Seriously, the silence in that room is louder than the fight itself. Pan Mark, the head instructor, is gripped by a look of pure shock, muttering, "You're kidding," as he watches from the balcony. Everyone thought the match was decided the moment Decker closed the distance for a takedown. They expected Zeke to crumble under the physical pressure, but instead, he's rewriting the rules of the cradle right before their eyes. Just as Decker thinks he has the upper hand, Zeke drives a sharp punch squarely into his chin, forcing an instant release. Zeke's movements are so refined and composed that it's actually starting to creep the other students out. He isn't just surviving the encounter, he's completely dismantling Decker's pride with every single calculated strike. Among the stunned trainees, the future mercenary king, Liam, watches Zeke with a gaze that's both sharp and incredibly curious. He's questioning everything he thought he knew about the Draker parasite. Meanwhile, Decker is back on his heels, gasping for air and desperately trying to create some distance. He's finally realized he's no longer the predator, and that fear is written all over his face. A violent streak of purple light tears through the air as Decker lets out a panicked, desperate curse. Decker tries to scramble back, his arrogance crumbling into pure terror as he realizes his inferior cousin is moving faster than his eyes can even track. It's honestly satisfying to see the bully finally realize he's no longer the one in control here. Zeke lunges forward and seizes Decker by the hair, forcing the bully to look him right in the eyes. Decker is still trying to play the superior card, screaming about how Zeke dares to touch him, but the fear in his voice gives him away. Suddenly, the heightened senses skill kicks in, and Zeke notes that this familiar feeling is exactly what he's been waiting for. This is where the hunt truly begins. Violet ether coils around Zeke's arm like a hungry predator as he prepares to end the exchange. He's fully adapted to the flow of mana in this young body now, and the sheer pressure he's exerting makes the air in the ring feel heavy. He isn't interested in a long, drawn-out brawl anymore. He's here to put a permanent end to this fight, and he isn't asking for permission. A massive pillar of violet light erupts from the arena floor, swallowing both boys in a violent display of raw mana. The sheer force of the impact sends dust and debris flying toward the clouds, momentarily blinding every spectator in the stands. As the smoke starts to clear, we see Pan Mark's hand twitching in total shock. He's watching the complete annihilation of the Academy's status quo. Zeke delivers a brutal, calculated strike directly into Decker's chest, showing absolutely no intention of holding back. The system flashes a precise stab notification, highlighting the exact weak points where Zeke is dealing massive, critical damage. We see the internal impact against Decker's ribs, a chilling reminder that Zeke isn't just a talented trainee, he's a veteran killer in a child's body. But now that he's shown his true colors, can he survive the target he just placed on his own back? Zeke's fist is suddenly engulfed in a terrifying, swirling violet light. As he winds up for the final blow, a pathetic, stuttering stop escapes his opponent's lips. It's way too late for mercy now. Decker realized he was outclassed the second that mana flared up, but Zeke isn't the type to leave a job half-finished. Close up on Decker's terrified face as the sound of repeated, heavy impacts fills the arena. Zeke isn't just winning a fight, he's delivering a brutal lesson that these bullies will never forget. The parasite they once mocked is gone, replaced by a veteran killer who knows exactly where it hurts. Honestly, the sheer speed of those strikes is enough to make anyone's stomach turn. Zeke stands triumphantly over Decker's broken, bloody body as the violet mana begins to dissipate. He casually wipes the sweat and blood from his forehead with his bandaged hand, looking completely unfazed. He actually has the audacity to say his head feels clear now that he's sweated a bit. Imagine calling a one-sided beatdown a light workout. The surrounding trainees are frozen in place, their faces twisted with a mix of pure terror and disbelief. They can't even wrap their heads around what they just witnessed. Zeke turns his cold, violet gaze toward them, blood still streaking down his cheek. That look says it all. If any of them want to be next, they're more than welcome to try. A sharp, aggressive sound effect cuts through the heavy silence of the training hall. The tension in the room is so thick you could practically cut it with a blade. Even the instructors are probably questioning their own safety at this point. Zeke pushes his messy black hair back, letting out a satisfied breath as the adrenaline begins to level off. He repeats that he can finally think straight after breaking a sweat, completely ignoring the carnage at his feet. The other trainees start whispering in a panic, but Zeke shuts them down instantly, telling them to stop eyeballing him. He's officially the apex predator of the cradle now, and everyone else is just prey. But with the high-ranking spectators watching his every move, has Zeke just traded one enemy for a much more dangerous one? Zeke glares up with those glowing violet eyes, blood staining his face as he issues a direct challenge to the high-ranking spectators. He's not just winning, he's daring the instructors to step into the ring if they have a problem with his methods. A strange hum of mana vibrates through his bandaged frame, signaling that he's nowhere near finished. Honestly, the kid has zero chill, and I'm here for it. The crowd goes silent as Zeke's name echoes through the arena, but then he does the unthinkable. He points a finger and chooses his next Pancratian opponent, Jaken Vardek. Jaken is another cousin, and looking at the sheer terror on his face, he clearly didn't expect to be on the menu today. Zeke is systematically hunting down every member of his family who ever looked down on him. It's cold, calculated, and exactly what they deserve. Zeke stands alone in the massive arena, but he suddenly stops and claims that fighting just one person is way too boring. He turns his gaze toward the crowd and demands that Liam Stone, the future mercenary king, joins the fight as well. He actually thinks a 2-on-1 handicap match is the only way to make things fair. This kid's ego is through the roof, but given what we've seen, he might actually back it up. We see a split screen of the simmering rage from the other trainees contrasted against Zeke's calm, almost innocent-looking eyes. One of them snaps, calling Zeke a dumbass for underestimating them so blatantly. The air in the cradle is practically vibrating with killing intent now. You can feel the shift. This isn't a training exercise anymore, it's a full-blown grudge match. The threats get even darker as one trainee vows to beat Zeke to death the moment the bell rings. The head instructor, Pan Mark, tries to maintain some semblance of order, warning Zeke not to move until he gives the official signal. The three boys stand in the center of the ring, a triangle of pure hostility, as the instructor finally begins the countdown. My heart is actually racing. Is Zeke really ready for both of them at once? A calm, blue-haired boy watches from the sidelines with an observant gaze. Zeke immediately recognizes him as Liam, the future mercenary king, who will eventually dominate the continent. In the previous timeline, Liam started as a lowly servant to a noble house, and we see a flashback of him as a desperate child, weeping and begging for even a shred of an education at the academy. It's wild to think this kid, currently being overlooked by everyone, is a sleeping tiger. A silhouetted warrior stands amidst a burning orange horizon, holding a massive blade. Zeke recalls how Liam's path truly began after the fall of Baranon, where he rose from the ashes to become a mercenary. He didn't just survive, he conquered, eventually uniting the three largest mercenary groups under his single command. Knowing what he becomes makes his presence here feel like a ticking time bomb. A flurry of snow and ice surrounds a deadly figure leaping through the air with metal claws. This is the mercenary king at the height of his power, a man who entered continental wars and turned the tide for empires. Watching his younger self now, you can almost see that lethal instinct hidden behind his quiet eyes. Zeke knows he's the only one in this room who realizes just how dangerous Liam is going to be. A sharp, confident smile spreads across Zeke's face as the tension in the arena hits a breaking point. The head instructor finally bellows the word, begin, and the ground practically shatters under the force of the initial charge. White impact lines streak across the frame as the trainees collide with a violence that shouldn't belong to children. This is where the talking ends and the real nightmare begins for Zeke's bullies. One of the trainees freezes, his eye wide with pure, unadulterated shock as a shadow looms over him. Zeke's violet eye flares with a draconian light, his bandaged hand already moving to strike with terrifying precision. He scoffs at their attempt to double-team him, mockingly asking if they really thought cheap tricks would work. It's a total power move. He's not just fighting them, he's completely dismantling their confidence. Decker's eyes bulge in absolute shock as a guttural, ugh, escapes his throat from the sheer force of the encounter. Zeke doesn't give him a single heartbeat to recover, planting his boots firmly onto the stone floor with a heavy, authoritative thud. He glances back over his shoulder with a cold, predatory gaze that says he's just getting started with this evaluation. This definitely isn't the parasite these bullies used to kick around for fun. Zeke is playing a completely different game now, and the house is losing. A violent burst of violet mana explodes behind Zeke as he lunges forward, closing the distance like a blur of dark lightning. You're looking away, Zeke taunts, his voice slicing through the air as Decker's expression twists into a mask of pure panic. Zeke's fist is already inches from the target, and out of sheer, desperate instinct, Decker crosses his arms in a frantic, last-ditch attempt to block the incoming heat. The guy is visibly terrified, and honestly, seeing the way Zeke's mana is flaring, you can't even blame him for shaking. Zeke stands inches from his cousin's face, openly mocking him for being so paralyzed by fear that he's practically turned into a statue. He points out that Decker couldn't even predict a basic feint, proving that the gap in their actual combat IQ is massive. This is why I told you to come together, Zeke mutters, his tone dripping with a bored, clinical kind of disappointment. Before Decker can even open his mouth to respond, Zeke unleashes a sweeping low strike that cuts through the air with a violent, whistling sound. Zeke's violet eyes glow with a terrifying, draconian intensity as he tells Decker that his monstrous physique simply isn't enough to save him. The final impact is absolute. A massive slam echoes through the entire cradle facility as Decker is sent spiraling backward like a broken ragdoll. Decker hits the cold floor face first, his body twitching as the last of his consciousness disappears into the stone tiles. Zeke stands tall over the wreck of his former tormentor, but the tension in the room is at a breaking point. What will the high-ranking instructors do now that Zeke has completely demolished their favorite trainee? Bandaged fingers twitch as a heavy silence falls over the entire arena. The trainees are losing their minds because they can't reconcile the monster in the ring with the weakling they used to know. He's really 12, just like us, they whisper, and honestly, looking at that dark, crushing aura radiating off Zeke, it's a fair question. This isn't just a kid having a good day, this is something else entirely. Zeke's boots crunch on the stone as he begins to walk forward, his shadow looming large over the floor. He doesn't look like a child playing soldier. He looks like a predator closing in for the final kill. He raises a bandaged hand, his movements calculated and cold, signaling that he isn't even close to being finished with this evaluation. Zeke's violet eyes flash with a desperate, sharp intensity. He knows he can't afford a long, drawn-out brawl because his young heart is already screaming under the pressure of his mana. I won't be able to do anything if I let him attack first, he realizes, and before the instructors can even bark an order, he's a blur of violet light. He's gambling everything on speed, and it's honestly terrifying to watch. A heavy strike connects with a sickening thud, followed by a blinding flurry of motion. The system flickers to life, announcing the activation of Slash, an E-rank skill that turns his fists into a literal wall of violence meant to blind and overwhelm. It's a high-level barrage executed by a body that shouldn't be capable of it, and the sheer technical precision is just brutal. He's not just fighting, he's dismantling. The spectators are frozen, their mouths hanging open in total disbelief as the air pressure in the room shifts. What is that? One of them stammers, but only Liam, the blue-haired future mercenary king, seems to see the truth behind the moves. He recognizes it as a northern fist-fighting technique from the Midlands, a style that a trainee at the cradle should have zero knowledge of. Liam's gaze is fixed now, realizing Zeke is a far bigger threat than anyone imagined. Zeke's face tightens into a grimace as he feels the physical backlash of his own power. Even though he's standing dominant, he's internally cursing his trash child body for being so fragile compared to his adult peak. He's winning the fight, but his muscles are reaching their breaking point. The big question now is, can he keep this facade of absolute power up, or is he about to collapse right in front of the people he just insulted? Zeke glares at the massive wall of muscle that is Decker, feeling his lungs start to burn with every breath. Even with the mind of a legendary warrior, he's realizing that Decker's sheer physical size is becoming a massive problem for his current frame. I'm getting winded just from this, he admits to himself, frustrated that his stamina is failing so early. It's the ultimate struggle, having a god-tier brain trapped in a body that's barely out of diapers. Zeke's hand begins to shake violently as he reaches the absolute physical breaking point of this young, fragile form. Instead of backing off, he forces his violet draconian mana to condense into a swirling, lethal vortex around his knuckles. He knows he's likely to break his own bones just to finish this, but he doesn't hesitate for a second. This is the definition of a high-risk, high-reward play that only a madman, or a regressor, would try. Zeke locks eyes with Decker, his gaze glowing with a cold, murderous intensity that freezes the air. He lunges forward with a sudden, violent burst of speed, aiming to shatter the bully's defense with a single, concentrated strike. I'll take you down right through your guard, he growls internally. He isn't looking to score a point or win a match, he's looking for a total, undisputed shutdown. A massive explosion of violet light erupts as Zeke's strike connects with terrifying, bone-crunching force. The arena floor actually shatters and dust clouds billow upward as the raw power of the Elder Dragon mana overflows from his fist. That's not a trainee's move, that's the strike of a seasoned executioner. The sheer pressure of the impact makes it clear that the power dynamic in the Draker house just changed forever. The instructors and elite spectators are left in total shock, struggling to process how Zeke moved fast enough to dodge and counter. One of the masters realizes Zeke is sensing ether, a feat that should be physically impossible for a child who hasn't even begun formal mana training. Their entire worldview is being flipped upside down right now. They thought they were watching a parasite, but they're actually staring at a predator. Zeke follows through with a brutal, final blow that leaves Decker screaming in sheer, unadulterated agony. The monstrous bully is finally broken, his blood staining the arena floor as he collapses in a heap of shame. Zeke stands over his fallen cousin, bloodied and trembling, but he's won more than just a fight. The real question now is, with the future mercenary king Liam watching from the shadows, has Zeke just started a war he isn't physically ready to finish? Zeke's fist connects with Decker's jaw in a bone-shattering blur of motion. He isn't holding back a single ounce of strength anymore, and right as the impact lands, a blue system window flickers to life, announcing that, heightened senses, has been activated. Honestly, seeing that loudmouth Decker finally catch a hook like that, it's been a long time coming. Zeke wraps himself around Decker like a suffocating shadow, locking his cousin in a lethal, high-speed grapple. The afterimages of his movements show just how much faster his perception has become, his violet eyes glowing with a predatory light that feels ancient and heavy. If looks could kill, Decker would have been buried 10 seconds ago, but Zeke is just getting started with his lesson. Blood sprays from Decker's mouth as he gasps in pure, unadulterated shock. Zeke doesn't give him even a millisecond to breathe, immediately transitioning into a brutal barrage of strikes that look like a whirlwind of dark mana and raw violence. This isn't just a sparring match to Zeke, it's a public execution of the old family hierarchy. Zeke's face is twisted into a terrifying, focused grin, his eyes burning with the raw power of his draconian awakening. Nearby, the shaggy-haired observant trainee watches from the sidelines, his face turning pale as he realizes the parasite of the family is gone. You can almost feel the collective, "oh," from every bully in the room who ever dared to laugh at him. Violent shockwaves rip through the air with every single one of Zeke's movements, shaking the very foundation of the arena. One of the background trainees looks on with his mouth hanging open, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and total dread. Seriously, how do you even process it when the kid who could barely hold a sword starts moving like a seasoned war veteran? A massive cloud of dust settles as the final impact echoes through the training hall. Zeke stands tall over the crumpled, broken body of Decker, his breath coming out in cold, sharp bursts as the ether around him begins to stabilize. The hierarchy of the cradle didn't just change today. It was completely demolished by a boy everyone thought was a failure. But with the instructors watching closely, can Zeke really hide this irregular power for much longer? A sharp, predatory voice rings out across the training ground, dripping with a new kind of competitive hunger. The elite female trainee, who has spent years as the undisputed prodigy of the Draker family, finally locks her eyes on Zeke with a look that says he's finally worth her time. She's not mocking him anymore, she's issuing a direct challenge, shouting his name like he's the only target that matters. It's a complete 180 from the mockery he's used to, and honestly, it's much more dangerous. The title card flashes against a backdrop of swirling violet mana and ancient legacy. This is the moment the loser officially becomes the most watched person in the academy. It's chilling to see how fast the atmosphere shifts the second you show everyone you've got teeth. A senior instructor steps forward, his shadow looming over Zeke as the crowd goes quiet. He asks if the young master is alright, but he doesn't wait for an answer before grabbing Zeke's wrist. He claims he just needs to check his pulse to ensure he isn't injured. Zeke knows better, though. This is a manual search to see if Zeke has somehow forced an early aura awakening through irregular means. Intense blue energy suddenly flares from the instructor's hand, surging into Zeke's arm like a bolt of lightning. Zeke's eyes widen as he realizes he's standing in front of a blue knight, a tier of warrior that should be way out of his league right now. Usually, an instructor would just glance at a student's dantian, but this guy is being incredibly thorough, imbuing his own aura into Zeke's veins to feel for any hidden power. It's an invasive, high-level technique, and if Zeke's draconian mana reacts even a little bit, his secret is blown. A crystalline mana core glows as the narrator breaks down the brutal reality of the world's power scaling. It turns out that the white swordsman rank, the level every kid in this room is killing themselves to reach, is actually just the novice starting point. Zeke is playing a high-stakes game against a blue knight while he's still technically at the bottom of the food chain. Can he mask his overwhelming potential, or is his cover about to be ripped away by the very people supposed to protect him? An infographic of a warrior glowing with a faint golden light appears. Zeke breaks down the brutal hierarchy of this world, explaining that once you finally open your dantian and wake up your aura, you're officially a yellow swordsman. For most of the kids in the cradle, this is the absolute peak they hope to reach after the blessing rite. But for Zeke, this is just the bottom floor of a very tall skyscraper. Honestly, it's kind of crazy to think these prodigies are celebrating reaching a level he considers the bare minimum. A blue-armored knight swings a sword crackling with electricity. To earn the actual title of knight, you have to do more than just possess aura, you have to master the free control of it. Above that lies a terrifying threshold, the realm of those who have completely transcended their physical limits. Zeke is looking at the power scaling and realizing the gap between a trainee and a true master is a literal ocean. It makes you wonder, if he's starting from zero now, how much blood is he going to have to spill to close that distance? A legendary warrior cloaked in violent red flame stands amidst the carnage. We're talking about the Red Knights and the near-mythical Black Knights, monsters so rare that only a handful of them exist on the entire continent. These aren't just soldiers, they're walking natural disasters. Zeke's internal map of this world is sharp, and he knows exactly where the ceiling is. But seeing these ranks reminds him of the sheer scale of the enemies he might face if his identity as a regressor ever leaks out. Zeke's piercing violet eyes narrow as he shifts his focus to the man standing right in front of him. He starts putting the pieces together, wondering why a man skilled enough to be a high-tier commander is stuck acting as his babysitter. Then, he notices it, a specific movement, a flicker of mana that only 2 people in the entire world are supposed to be able to use. Blue sparks crackle as Zeke realizes he's being watched by someone way more dangerous than a simple servant. This isn't just a guard, it's a shadow. Zeke stares directly into the older man's eyes, his expression turning cold and accusatory. He doesn't hold back, asking the man point blank if he's hiding something from him. The tension in the hallway is so thick you could cut it with a blade as the man goes dead silent. But just as things get really heavy, Zeke turns his back and waves a hand, casually claiming he was just joking. Yeah, right. Zeke just fired a warning shot. He's letting his babysitter know that the loser of the Draker family sees everything. But now that the cat's out of the bag, will this mystery man become an ally, or is he Zeke's first real threat? Zeke stands firm, looking back with a gaze that could cut glass. He tells his silent observer that Decker's entire line of questioning was flawed from the start, as things are finally returning to their rightful places. He's taking total control now, ordering the man to simply follow his lead and stay in his shadow. The butler bows instantly, acknowledging him as young master without a second thought. Honestly, seeing Zeke command this kind of respect after being treated like family trash is so satisfying. The scene shifts to a quiet hallway as the butler opens the heavy doors to a private wing. He's already prepared the specific training room Zeke requested, showing a level of efficiency that borders on suspicious. Zeke dismisses him with a cold wave, telling the man he's free to rest for the night. He's acting like a true high-ranking lord, but there's a much deeper game being played here. Zeke watches the man leave, his eyes narrowing as he weighs the risks of his current situation. He realizes that if someone is paying to have him watched, he needs to keep that spy within arm's reach to eventually flip the script. The realization that his own siblings are likely the ones plotting his downfall adds a whole new layer of grit to his survival. Who can you even trust when your own blood is waiting for you to slip up? Zeke enters the empty training hall, a massive stone space filled with the scent of iron and old wood. He figures it's finally time to dive into the system and see the raw data behind his new life. A blue holographic window erupts in front of him, revealing his title as the one who received the blessing of the ancient dragon. Seeing that rare healer class is a total trip, especially since Zeke's idea of healing usually involves breaking bones. Zeke scans the skill list, noticing that his technique has already leveled up to proficient after just one real fight. It seems the system is refining the movements he makes in the heat of battle, turning his instincts into official stats. But as he looks closer at the draconian skills locked behind karma points, he hits a wall of questions. What's the real difference between a skill and a class skill, and just how much blood does he have to spill to unlock the ancient dragon's true power? Zeke is about to find out that the path to the top is paved with more than just experience points. Zeke stares at a blue system window demanding 10 karma points to unlock a draconian skill. The screen clarifies that these points are only earned by slaying monsters. It's a classic system hurdle. He's got the potential, but he's currently locked out of his own best moves. Honestly, having a cheat code you can't actually use yet is the ultimate tease. Zeke's face darkens as he realizes he needs to be at least a purple knight to even gain access to the monster-infested zones. He looks down at a jagged, dark relic shard in his hand, frustrated by the lack of information regarding his new draconian class. He's effectively a god in the making, but right now, he's just a kid with a very expensive paperweight. It's clear that simply being a regressor isn't going to be enough to bypass the world's strict hierarchy. Zeke lets out a sharp exhale and mutters, whatever, deciding to focus on the immediate threat. He tightens his bandaged grip on a standard training sword, shifting his weight into a low, lethal combat stance. The time for theory is over. If he wants to reach those dungeons, he has to tear through the Academy's elite first, and he's more than ready to start the harvest. A cold, violet light ignites in Zeke's left eye as he holds his blade vertically, splitting his face in the reflection. This isn't the look of a trainee, it's the gaze of a veteran who has seen the end of the world. You can practically feel the temperature in the room drop. He's not just playing at being a swordsman anymore. An image of a knight clad in blue energy appears, illustrating the two absolute powers of this world, the aura of knights and the mana of mages. While knights reinforce their bodies through dantians, mages stabilize their power through complex internal circles. It's a rigid system that has defined power for centuries, leaving those without either in the dirt. The silhouette of Zeke as a lonely vagabond flashes back, reminding us that he was once abandoned by his family for being unable to awaken either power. That was until he met his master during his darkest days, who taught him the forbidden arts of healing and the legendary Ether Hall. This is the secret sauce, the power that exists outside the world's known laws. Violent streaks of purple energy explode across the frame as Zeke prepares to unleash a strike that defies common sense. He remembers his master's words, "They are the only two people who can truly manipulate ether." This is the moment where the loser, Zeke Draker, officially dies, and a monster that the Draker family can't possibly control is born. But can his young body actually handle the strain of a power that shouldn't exist? Purple mana swirls violently around Zeke as he executes a strike that tears through the air with a deafening OH sound effect. He's testing the raw power of ether, knowing that being an ether user puts him in a league of his own compared to these regular trainees. It's a terrifying advantage, but it's also a heavy burden for a body this young. Honestly, seeing him move like that, it's clear he's playing a completely different game now. Zeke slumps over his training sword, his chest heaving as sweat pours down his face in the middle of the arena. He's only been at it for 2 hours, but the sheer intensity of his new techniques has pushed him to the absolute point of collapse. Just as his legs begin to give out, the system chimes in, activating vigor recovery, to force his muscles back into shape. It's basically a cheat code for overworking yourself, and Zeke is going to need every bit of it. We see a close-up of Zeke's hands, trembling and white-knuckled as they grip the hilt for support while he catches his breath. He realizes that a healing skill this potent is unheard of, something his former master only mentioned in legends. If the Draker family finds out he can regenerate his stamina like this, they won't just see him as a genius, they'll treat him like a dangerous anomaly. Keeping this a secret is going to be just as hard as the training itself. Zeke retreats to the privacy of his room, his silhouette lost in the darkness as he focuses on his breathing to let the recovery finish. He had to move fast to hide his condition from the instructors, but now that the pain is receding, his violet eyes are already sharpening for the next task. He looks up with a gaze that's far too old for his face. He's not just recovering, he's evolving, and he's doing it way faster than anyone expects. He grips his sword once more, a quiet, "I'll keep going," escaping his lips as the scene shifts to a burning sunset over the academy. The sky is painted in deep oranges and purples, signaling the end of the day, but Zeke is still vibrating with a restless, hungry energy. It's already dinner time, which means he has to leave the training grounds and step back into the social lion's den. I wouldn't want to be the person who tries to mess with his meal tonight. Sharp red impact lines slash across the frame as the scene transitions to the academy's stone halls filled with a low, vibrating hum. One of the trainees looks completely lost, internally panicking over what he's supposed to say to Decker after the big guy's humiliating defeat. The social hierarchy of the cradle is being dismantled in real time, and everyone can feel the shift. It's a mess, and honestly, it's exactly what this family deserves for looking down on him. Trainees huddle over their meal trays in the canteen, whispering frantically. The gossip about Zeke is spreading like a wildfire through the academy, with everyone wondering how the family loser suddenly became a completely different person. Honestly, seeing these guys change their tune the second power is involved. It's classic cradle behavior. They're actually hoping Zeke goes on a tear and humbles the stronger guys at the top of the food chain. A lavish spread of roasted meat and greens sits on a polished dining table. This isn't the standard trainee grub, this is the elite tier, where Reina Turin is busy tearing into a steak with predatory intensity. Her eyes are sharp, focused, and show zero hesitation as she eats. She's not just refueling, she's preparing for a hunt, and you can tell she's the type of person who doesn't tolerate weakness, especially not in herself. The camera pulls back to show the overhead view of the high-tier table during the meal. Someone mentions that everyone needs to keep their energy up for the upcoming swordsmanship duel, but the mood is anything but casual. Owen Zimmons is sitting there looking absolutely livid, his face twisting as the conversation turns towards Zeke's recent, irregular, performance. You can practically feel the steam coming off him. He's clearly not handling the news of Zeke's rise very well. Owen slams his hands onto the table, erupting with a shocked, "What?" that echoes through the room. His sudden outburst sends a piece of meat flying as the sheer disrespect of Zeke's success hits him like a physical blow. His eyes are wide, trembling with a mix of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. It's the look of a guy who realizes the person he's been stepping on is suddenly taller than him. That's a hard pill to swallow for someone with an ego that big. Owen tries to regain his composure, wiping his mouth while his hands still shake from the adrenaline. Across from him, Reina Turin remains eerily calm, her gaze fixed on her own thoughts as she processes what she saw in the arena. She identifies Zeke's fighting style as Pancration, a savage, ancient form of combat that was as brutal as it was effective. While Owen is busy throwing a tantrum, Reina is actually respecting the craft. She knows that what Zeke did wasn't a fluke, it was a god-tier execution of a forgotten art. Now the real question is, who's going to be the first elite to try and shut him down? A shaggy-haired trainee stares into space with a look of pure doubt. Even after that beatdown, some kids still think Zeke is a total fraud. They're whispering in the dining hall, reminding everyone that Zeke was so weak he needed a custom-made, lightweight sword just to stand upright. Decker is there too, nursing his ego and his bruises, claiming he only lost because of a fluke. It's honestly pathetic how fast they try to rewrite history when they're scared. A hand slams a fork onto the table as a single word echoes, luck. The room goes dead silent instantly. You can feel the temperature in the canteen drop as every head turns toward the source of the tension. The whispers stop, replaced by that heavy, suffocating feeling you get right before a fight breaks out. These kids are realizing that the loser they used to mock isn't someone they can just ignore anymore. Zeke looks down at the group of trainees from his seat at the table. He tells them flat out that if they think luck determines a fight, they have zero right to call themselves Draker Knights. It's a cold, hard reality check delivered by the very person they were just insulting. He stands up, his shadow looming over the table, and starts walking away. The disrespect is palpable, and honestly, he's earned every bit of it. Two swords clash in a burst of purple and blue energy during a high-stakes duel. This is what everything in the cradle leads to. The sword duel is the ultimate test, and it's where most of the accidents happen. But more importantly, the blessing rite is finally here. This is the moment where a Draker's true potential is unlocked and their aura awakens. This isn't just a test of skill, it's a life or death ritual that defines your entire future in the family. Mark watches with a grim expression as Zeke steps onto the training grounds. But he's not carrying that pathetic, lightweight toothpick from before. Zeke is hauling a ridiculously massive hunk of iron over his shoulder, and the crowd is losing their minds. They're all asking the same thing. How is the family weakling suddenly swinging a sword that big? Get ready, because the real show is about to start. Zeke stands his ground, the massive hunk of iron resting on his shoulder like it weighs absolutely nothing. A shaggy-haired trainee steps out from the crowd, looking way more serious than the usual bullies Zeke deals with. He officially calls out a challenge, picking Zeke as his opponent in front of the entire academy. Honestly, after what Zeke did to Decker, you'd think these guys would start checking their life insurance before stepping up. Zeke's grip tightens on the massive hilt as a dark, intense pressure starts to leak from his body. The trainee lunges forward with a shout, but the moment he gets within range, his face goes completely pale. He's watching Zeke swing that claymore like a lightweight toy, and the physics of it just don't make sense. How is the family parasite suddenly moving a heavy infantry weapon faster than a standard blade? Purple mana begins to swirl around Zeke, making the air itself feel heavy and suffocating for everyone nearby. The trainee realizes mid-swing that this isn't the Zeke he remembers, the one who could barely hold a practice sword straight. He tries to tell himself it's just a growth spurt or a trick, but that aura is screaming, predator. He accepted this duel with total confidence, but now, he's just trying to survive the next 5 seconds. We see the challenger gulping hard, the sheer pressure of Zeke's presence making his knees go weak. But the crazy part is, this trainee isn't even the biggest problem in the room. That would be the elite female trainee watching from the wings. She's known as the Lightning Knight, a literal war hero who awakened her aura years before her peers were even allowed to carry real steel. If Zeke is going to make it through the cradle, he's going to have to face a girl who's already a living legend. This is where things get really dangerous. Reina glares with predatory purple eyes, her breathing heavy and controlled as she locks onto her target. Zeke realizes he's not just facing some talented kid, this girl awakened her aura years ago, putting her on a completely different level than the rest of the class. She claims she's only here to improve her fundamentals, which is basically a polite way of saying she's a professional shark swimming in a pond full of goldfish. Honestly, it's a bit insulting. She's a literal war hero pretending to be a student just to sharpen her claws on kids like him. The instructor's hand drops and a sharp, begin echoes through the training hall. Before the word even finishes, Zeke and Reina's blades collide with a violent, metallic scream. Zeke's boots skid across the stone floor as they blur into a high-speed exchange that leaves the air shimmering. They're moving so fast the camera can barely keep up with the impact lines. If Zeke misses his timing by even a fraction of a second, he's going to lose more than just a spar. A massive explosion of dust and wind erupts as Reina lunges forward with a strike that looks like a literal lightning bolt. The impact is so heavy it sends a shockwave rippling across the arena, cracking the very ground beneath them. This isn't a friendly match anymore. It's a high-tier execution. You can practically feel the pressure radiating off her. She's genuinely trying to crush him into the dirt right here and now. Zeke stands his ground in the center of the wreckage, his violet eyes glowing through the thick haze of dust. He admits to himself that Reina is actually better than he expected, but there's a but in his inner monologue that should honestly terrify her. He isn't panicked or even breathing hard, he's just calmly measuring the distance. That's the scary thing about a veteran's soul in a young body. He's not just fighting. He's calculating her downfall. The crowd of trainees starts screaming for Reina to stop toying with him and just kill him in one strike, their faces twisted with a mix of fear and hate. Another massive eruption of sparks flies as their swords lock together in a lethal, grinding struggle. The onlookers are completely stunned because Reina's killing blow didn't even make him flinch. It doesn't just look like he's holding his own, it looks like Reina's perfect technique is starting to crack. The entire hierarchy of the cradle is crumbling right in front of them, and if Zeke wins this, there's no telling how far this loser will go. Jaken lunges forward with a frantic sword strike. Zeke stares him down, his heightened senses revealing gaps in his cousin's clumsy movements. Honestly, Jaken has no idea he's already been dissected. Spark-flying steel echoes through the arena as Zeke parries effortlessly. Every time Jaken tries to find an opening, Zeke's heavy blade is already there, almost applauding his pathetic attempts. He's just playing with his food now. Zeke stands firm as yet another massive weakness appears in Jaken's defense. His violet eyes pulse with an icy, veteran intensity that should not belong to a kid. The crazy part, to the spectators, this is a high-stakes battle, but to Zeke, it's barely a training session. Zeke's violet eye glows with a terrifying, predatory focus. He's not just fighting Jaken, he's treating this high-stakes duel like a private lesson. Jaken finally realizes he's nothing more than a live training dummy. Honestly, it's a total ego death for the former bully. Blades collide in a blinding shower of golden sparks. Zeke deflects Jaken's desperate strikes effortlessly while scanning the entire arena. Why is he so calm? It's because he's already looking past this fight and onto a much bigger target. Reina Turin wipes sweat from her face, her breathing heavy and labored. Zeke observes the future Lightning Knight, noting her obsession with fundamentals and her honest sword. He's gauging her current strength against the legend she's supposed to become. But will her honesty be enough to survive what's coming? Reina Turin stands ready, her posture reflecting years of perfect, honest training. Zeke studies her, realizing her obsession with fundamentals is a cage limiting her potential. He decides it's time to act as the catalyst and break her out of that shell. Talk about a dangerous wake-up call. Zeke drops into a lethal, low-profile stance, his violet eyes burning with intensity. Jaken Vardek tenses up, recognizing that Zeke is about to close the gap in a single, explosive burst. Jaken tries to trust his own speed, but his trembling hands give him away. The pressure is just suffocating. Zeke transforms into a purple blur, lunging across the arena with terrifying velocity. Jaken can't even finish his thought before Zeke is already on him, his mind screaming that he's too fast. If he doesn't move now, this fight is over in an instant. A streak of violet light cleaves the air as Zeke strikes. Jaken freezes, realizing his cousin is moving at a speed he can't process before the iron sword pulverizes the ground. That KKRAK sound is absolutely brutal. Jaken's eyes dart frantically as he tries to find a way out. He desperately thinks that distance is his only salvation, hoping he can still react to the next swing. Poor guy is basically lying to himself at this point. Dust explodes as Zeke suddenly releases his grip on the massive hilt. Instead of recovering his blade, he lunges forward barehanded with zero hesitation. Ditching your only weapon mid-fight? That's either insane or genius. Shards of stone fly past Jaken's face as he realizes the trap. He stands paralyzed by the sheer killing intent radiating from an unarmed Zeke. You can literally see the moment his spirit breaks. Jaken's eyes widen in pure terror as Zeke's shadow looms over him. Zeke doesn't just attack, he dominates the space, closing the distance before Jaken can even process the movement. Honestly, the poor guy looks like he's staring at his own funeral. A massive iron sword spins violently through the air, carving a path through the dust. Zeke isn't even holding it anymore, yet he's controlling the entire rhythm of the fight while Jaken stumbles back in total disarray. It's a masterclass in psychological warfare. Sweat pours down Jaken's face as he realizes Zeke's hand is poised for a lethal strike. He stares into the cold abyss of those violet eyes and finally understands the power gap. In his mind, only one thought remains: he's finished. A massive iron sword whistles through the air before embedding itself deep into the stone floor. Zeke has officially abandoned his only weapon mid-duel. It's a move so insane the entire arena goes silent. Jaken collapses in a cold sweat while the crowd erupts, shouting that Zeke has already lost. They're all praising Reina Turin, convinced she didn't even need her aura to handle him. Honestly, these kids have no idea what they're looking at. One instructor narrows his eyes, realizing the terrifying truth the students missed. As Zeke closed the distance, Reina was actually forced to leak the faintest flicker of aura just to defend herself. Zeke is already making a future legend sweat, and he's barely started. Reina stares on, her aristocratic poise barely hiding her shock. The instructors realize Zeke did the impossible. He forced the Lightning Knight to tap into her aura way ahead of schedule. That's a massive red flag for anyone still doubting him. Jaken trembles, his face pale as Zeke stalks toward him like a predator. Zeke's violet eyes lock onto his cousin, whispering that the nightmare is just beginning. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Can Jaken even find a way out of this? A heavy blow connects, sending blood flying as Jaken hits the floor hard. Zeke stands over his broken cousin while the spectators watch in absolute silence. It's official, the family hierarchy just went up in smoke. Who's going to be brave enough to challenge him next? Jaken coughs up blood, shivering on the cold stone as Zeke looms over him like a silent shadow. The crowd isn't cheering for the winner, though. They're actually furious that Zeke ditched his massive sword to win with his bare hands. Talk about a total breach of knightly etiquette. The spectators erupt in insults, pointing fingers and screaming that Zeke is a complete disgrace to the Draker name. They're already trying to hand the moral victory to Reina, claiming Zeke doesn't have the heart of a true warrior. It's pure salt from the sidelines, honestly. Zeke looks down at the mess he made, totally unfazed by the noise as he coldly asks Jaken if he wants to keep going. Jaken is barely breathing, trembling as he mutters that he hasn't lost yet. But looking at him, he's one move away from a total collapse. Can he even stand back up? Jaken grits his teeth, desperately lying to himself that he only lost because he let his guard down. But then, the real horror sinks in. He stares at Zeke and realizes that if those bare hands held even a small dagger, he'd be a corpse right now. That realization is absolutely soul-crushing for him. Jaken finally closes his eyes and whispers that he loses. The stadium falls into a stunned silence as Zeke calmly stands over his fallen cousin. Just days ago, everyone called Zeke human scum, but now he's the monster that just dismantled a top-tier prodigy. The instructors are speechless, and honestly, they should be terrified of what Zeke does next. A massive text box declares Zeke Draker the undisputed winner. The announcer's voice booms through the stadium while Zeke casually walks away, leaving his iron sword buried in the stone floor. It's official. The human scum just obliterated the family's golden boy without breaking a sweat. Reina Turin watches from the sidelines, her eyes narrowing as she tracks Zeke's every move. For the first time, the legendary Lightning Knight isn't looking down on him, she's analyzing a threat. Zeke has successfully forced his way onto her radar, and that gaze tells me things are about to get way more intense. Zeke's figure slowly disappears into the dark hallway as the arena lights fade to black. He's survived the evaluation and shattered the status quo, but the real monsters are now waking up to his existence. If this was just the warm-up, I'm genuinely terrified for whoever crosses his path next. A silhouetted castle stands swallowed by a roaring inferno under a choked sky. We're seeing a landscape of pure carnage where bodies are piled high and blood literally paints the dirt. This is the brutal reality of the world Zeke is trying to navigate, a glimpse of total annihilation where people are dragged away like sacks of grain. Honestly, if this is the future waiting for him, it's no wonder he's pushing himself past the breaking point. Steam rises from a teacup inside a quiet, dimly lit room while letters sit scattered on a desk. Despite the grim atmosphere outside, Abel is questioning how Reina Turin can stay so composed in this situation. The rumor mill is already on fire because word has leaked. Zeke, the boy everyone wrote off, actually managed to defeat the legendary Lightning Knight. It's the kind of news that turns a noble household upside down in a single night, and the shockwaves are just starting to hit. Reina looks down, her crimson hair shadowing her face as she leans into the conversation. She asks exactly how much time is left until the blessing rite, and the answer is locked in: the next full moon. She decides right then and there to pay the Draker family a personal visit. You can practically feel the tension shifting. When a warrior of her caliber decides to show up unannounced, it usually means the rite is about to become a total powder keg. A gloved hand tightens its grip around the textured hilt of a sword as embers drift through the air. Abel watches the shadows, acknowledging that their youngest is about to step into a trial that will define his entire existence. This isn't just a ceremony, it's a moment of truth where Zeke either claims his birthright or gets crushed by the weight of his own lineage. Zeke stands alone in the center of a desolate stone courtyard, his silhouette small against the massive architecture of the cradle. His victory over Reina has left the entire academy in a state of absolute, unadulterated shock. But even with the faculty and students whispering his name in fear, the real test is still looming. He's survived the combat, but can he survive the ritual that once branded him a failure? We're about to find out. A title card flashes on screen, an entire month has flown by, and it's finally the day of the blessing rite. Zeke is drenched in sweat, gasping for air as he wipes his face with a towel after one last session. He's staring at his reflection, genuinely baffled at how he managed to reach the rank of Red Knight in his previous life with a body that feels this fragile. It's a humbling reminder of just how much he's had to grind to catch up to his own memories. Zeke pulls up his status window, revealing his rare healer class and that Blessing of the Ancient Dragon title still sitting at the top. But check out the combat tab. His physical skills are actually evolving in real time. His basic /skill just hit its limit and transformed into continuous /, resetting his mastery but massively boosting his lethality. He's not just a healer anymore, he's turning himself into a surgical weapon before the big day. A sharp knock at the door interrupts his thoughts as Zeke looks toward the entrance with those piercing violet eyes. His training room floor is an absolute mess of deep, jagged gouges from his month of non-stop practice. Honestly, it looks like a monster was living in there. He calmly tells Decker he'll be out soon, showing that even with the most important ritual of his life looming, his focus hasn't wavered for a single second. The camera pans up to a gorgeous, sprawling blue sky as we finally leave the academy grounds behind. A heavy carriage rumbles down the dirt path, the wheels kicking up dust as Zeke travels toward the heart of the Draker territory. The vibe is quiet, but the tension is thick because we know exactly what's waiting for him at the end of this road. Inside the carriage, Zeke looks like a completely different person, dressed in the formal, high-collared military uniform of a Draker noble. We see a map of the continent, highlighting the Duchy of Troy where his family holds absolute, terrifying power. This rite has to be held at the main estate, the legendary site where the very first Dragon Slayer began their journey. Talk about a high-stakes homecoming. The Dragon's Nest lair looms over the horizon, a massive fortress of Gothic spires and intimidating stone that looks more like a cathedral than a home. Zeke steps out of the carriage and looks up at the ancestral estate that once turned its back on him. He's standing there, a small silhouette against the massive architecture, but he isn't shaking this time. The kid who was once branded a failure has returned to the lion's den, and he's ready to flip the script. The massive hall of the cradle echoes with a booming attention that cuts through the chatter of the crowd. All the Draker trainees stand in perfect rows, and Zeke looks completely different in his formal black and red military uniform. He's scanning the room, trying to keep his breathing steady. This is it, the day that originally broke him. Up on the high balconies, high-ranking officials and family informants are staring down like vultures looking for a weak link. Zeke knows they're only here to watch him fall flat on his face again. He tells himself they'll just ignore him like a piece of trash once the ceremony starts. Honestly, let them think that. It's easier to shock people when they don't see you coming. Suddenly, Zeke's violet eyes widen in pure shock as he spots a face that definitely shouldn't be here. Why is that bastard here? He curses under his breath, his heart skipping a beat. High above, Reyna Turin, the legendary Lightning Knight, is being questioned by the instructors about her presence. Why would a war hero like her waste time at a kid's graduation? A gloved hand grips the balcony railing as a man leans forward with a chilling, predatory grin. It's Abel, the butchering knight and second son of the Turin family. Reyna's blue eyes lock onto Zeke instantly, and she whispers, "Oh, there he is." This just got a lot more complicated. Having one Turin here was a problem, but seeing Abel is a nightmare. Zeke's jaw clenches so hard you can almost hear the bone grind as he stares back at the balcony. He has to force himself to stay composed, but his mind is racing through every memory of his past life. Abel would have never come to see him during the original blessing rite. The timeline is shifting fast, and Zeke realizes his recent actions have finally drawn the eyes of the family's most dangerous predators. He isn't just a failure anymore, he's a target. Zeke's hand trembles as he clenches his fist, the fabric of his uniform groaning under the sudden pressure. He thinks to himself that if the high-ranking family heads are finally watching, this is his one shot to change his destiny forever. He stares ahead with eyes that look like they've already seen 100 wars. This kid's focus is actually kind of terrifying. An instructor's voice cuts through the heavy silence of the massive hall, calling for the first candidate, Aaron. We see the rows of nervous trainees as Aaron begins his long, lonely walk toward the ritual pedestal in the center of the room. Every footstep echoes like a drumbeat against the cold stone floor. The tension in here is so thick you could practically cut it with a sword. Aaron stands before the ornate device, nervously adjusting the gold fringe on his epaulets to hide his shaking hands. He takes a deep breath and presses his palm down, letting the ritual needle pierce his skin to draw out his hidden aura. A small splash of blood hits the surface, acting as the final key to his inner power. Man, just imagine having your entire future decided by a single drop of blood. Tiny blue sparks start dancing across his fingertips before the mana suddenly ignites into a blinding flash of light. It's not just a small glow anymore, the energy starts swirling around him like a miniature hurricane, picking up speed by the second. Something feels a little off about this. This isn't just a standard awakening, it's turning into a total mana surge. The light deepens into a rich, dark blue as the energy begins to spiral toward the high ceiling of the cradle. Shards of mana flicker through the air like frozen rain while the vortex gains even more violent speed. The sheer scale of the release is making the air itself hum with a heavy, electric charge. Now everyone is leaning forward in their seats. They definitely weren't expecting this much raw power from the first kid. A massive tidal wave of aura erupts, spinning into a beautiful, violent cyclone that dominates the entire center of the room. The energy is so dense it's practically visible as liquid light, crashing against the invisible barriers of the hall with a deafening roar. It's absolutely overwhelming to witness. If this is the kind of power Aaron is packing, what the hell is Zeke going to unleash when it's his turn? Swirling blue energy fills the screen like a cosmic tide. This is the blessing rite, the absolute peak of a young Draker's life at the cradle. At exactly 12 years old, every member of the bloodline undergoes a ritual to awaken the aura that's been sealed inside them since birth. While ordinary knights have to spend half their lives just to feel a flicker of mana, these kids are essentially handed a cheat code to greatness the moment they graduate. It's a literal birthright of power. Violent red sparks jump off the ornate mana lamps lining the stone walls. Suddenly, the calm atmosphere takes a sharp turn as the lighting begins to glitch, crackling with a jagged, crimson intensity. The guests are already starting to whisper, sensing that the mana density in the room is spiking to dangerous levels. You can see the static crawling across the architecture. It's like the very air is becoming pressurized. This definitely isn't part of the standard procedure. A young noble stands tall, enveloped in a shimmering blue field of force. This is the manifestation of mana inhibition, a high-tier trait found only in the most elite purebloods. The power is so raw and disruptive that these awakeners actually require specialized gloves just to interact with the world, otherwise, they'd accidentally crush or repel everything they touch. Imagine being so naturally powerful that just living an ordinary life becomes a logistical nightmare. That's the kind of problem most warriors would die for. The Dronzer family crest glows with a golden, regal intensity. This right is the ultimate gatekeeper. Only those who prove their pureblood descent through this awakening are officially conferred the prestigious Dronzer name. The crowd is absolutely buzzing now, and the instructors don't bother hiding their anticipation as they call for the next candidate. They're calling him the main dish of the evening. Everyone is dying to see if the boy who defeated the legendary Reina Turin can actually back up his reputation during the awakening. A black military boot steps firmly onto the red carpet toward the basin. Zeke Dronzer walks toward the massive ceremonial statue, his violet eyes colder than ever. He's not just walking toward a promotion, he's walking toward the exact spot where his life was ruined in his previous timeline. He remembers the humiliation of being labeled a failed awakener vividly. The last time he stood here, it was a nightmare, but this time, he's carrying the blessing of the ancient dragon. Is he about to break the scales? Glowing, spectral eyes watch from the shadows of Zeke's memory. He's standing exactly where his old life ended, remembering the day the blessing right branded him with a shameful title. It's a heavy start, and you can practically feel the bitterness in his chest. Imagine coming back to the place that ruined you just to prove everyone wrong. Flashes of Zeke's new abilities flicker through his mind, showing his growth from a simple healer to an ether manipulator. He stands tall in his formal Dronzer uniform, the gold epaulets catching the light as he stares down his destiny. He looks like a completely different person compared to the failed kid from the original timeline. The glow in his eyes, that's the look of a kid who knows something the rest of the room doesn't. A massive pillar of blue mana erupts from the ritual site, spiraling upward like a localized hurricane. The sheer force of the energy is blowing back the observers, sending sparks of light flying everywhere. This isn't just an awakening, it's a total system shock. Zeke is right in the center of it, and the sound alone must be deafening. The mana cyclone intensifies, swirling into a violent vortex that looks like it's about to tear the hall apart. Zeke stays perfectly still, his silhouette barely visible through the crashing waves of blue light. The pressure in the air is getting insane. You have to wonder, is he controlling the mana, or is the mana trying to consume him? The storm suddenly vanishes, leaving the entire grand hall in a haunting, heavy silence. The instructors are paralyzed, and Reina Turin, the lightning knight herself, is staring with her jaw nearly on the floor. Someone in the crowd finally manages to gasp out that this has never happened before. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a sword. Zeke's hand hangs over the ceremonial water, his fingers dripping as ripples spread out from his touch. He looks down at his reflection, his expression unreadable as he thinks to himself that he shouldn't have expected things to change. It sounds like a defeat, right? But look at the water. That isn't the reaction of a failure. Something much more unique just took place. Is he about to drop a bombshell on this entire family? Zeke stands perfectly still, his sharp violet eyes scanning the room as Reina Turin watches his every move from the high balcony like a hawk. Behind him, the crowd starts to hiss with malicious excitement, convinced he's finally been exposed as a total fraud. The whispers are brutal. People are calling him a cursed blood and an embarrassment to the entire Dronzer lineage. Zeke just sighs, realizing that no matter the timeline, these vultures never change. But hey, if they want a show, he's about to give them one they'll never forget. A system window glitches into existence right in front of Zeke's face, and the crazy part, it's actually apologizing to him. Apparently, some necessary information was missing from his initial identification, and the system is scrambling to fix the error in real time. The air in the cathedral starts to vibrate as the class information input finally hits 100%. You can feel the tension cranking up to a breaking point. Everyone expects a fizzle, but the mana in the room is starting to scream. The screen flashes with a rare class notification, but that's just the beginning of the chaos. Suddenly, a violent pillar of crimson light erupts from the ritual water, shooting straight toward the ceiling mural with a deafening roar. The audience is absolutely stunned, shouting that this is the undeniable signature of a high-tier, pure-blood awakening. 1 second they were mocking him, and the next, they're trembling at the sheer intensity of the red glare. It's a total 180, and honestly, the look of sheer terror on the bullies' faces is priceless. A final chime echoes as the ancient dragon's blessing, which was sealed deep in Zeke's soul, finally snaps wide open and connects with the terminal. Golden energy begins to coil around his body like a living serpent, merging with that intense red aura to manifest a power that shouldn't exist in a 12-year-old. It's the mana inhibition ability, a trait reserved for the absolute elite of the Dronzer family. Up on the balcony, Reina Turin looks completely rattled, her blue eyes wide with shock. She came here to watch a simple ceremony, but she's witnessing the birth of a monster. How is she even supposed to explain this to the rest of the family? System windows flare to life as Zeke's rare healer class and the ancient dragon's blessing slam together to create something entirely new. The notification confirms it. Unique class has been born from the merger of his two legendary talents. Zeke stands at the center of the hall in his black and gold Draco uniform, looking colder and more composed than any 12-year-old should. It's official, he's just rewritten the rules of his own soul. The intense light of the ritual begins to settle, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. A title card featuring legendary warriors flashes briefly, serving as a reminder of the epic path Zeke is now carving for himself. He isn't just a regressor anymore, he's a wild card that the world isn't ready for. You can practically feel the weight of destiny shifting in this room. Faint golden embers drift through the massive hall as the observers start to stir. The crowd is murmuring in total confusion, wondering if they saw flashes of gold or a deep, ominous red during the awakening. Everyone is looking for a sign to tell them if this was a success or a disaster. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a sword. Zeke stares down at his bandaged hands, his violet eyes unreadable as he checks his own status. The mana lamp, the traditional measuring stick for this rite, is completely unbroken, which immediately sends a wave of doubt through the spectators. There was no mana inhibition, a voice whispers from the shadows, convinced this wasn't a true pure-blood awakening. It's crazy how fast they're willing to call him a failure just because he doesn't fit their little box. Reina Turin leans over the balcony, her crimson hair catching the light as she flashes a sharp, confident smile. She cuts through the panicked whispers by asking the room why they're all acting so serious. "Isn't this something to celebrate?" she calls out, her voice dripping with authority. She's the only one who truly understands the terrifying power she just witnessed. The atmosphere flips instantly as the nobles begin to cheer and clap, desperately trying to follow Reina's lead. Shouts of "blessing," and "that's right," fill the cathedral-like hall as everyone pretends they weren't just doubting him a second ago. One official even bellows for a glove to be brought for their newest elite member. Zeke has successfully navigated the rite that once destroyed him, and now, the very people who look down on him are forced to chant his name. Zeke stares down at his gloved hand, feeling the sheer weight of the mana coursing through his veins. It's hefty, a physical pressure he never felt in his first life as a failure. Honestly, he's still processing that he actually flipped the script on his own destiny. Guards scramble across the red-carpeted hall as an official barks orders to wrap up the ceremony. Reina Turin watches the chaos from the sidelines, her blue eyes locked onto Zeke with a look that's half intrigue and half threat. Something tells me she's not just impressed, she's looking for a weakness. Zeke narrows his eyes, glancing up at the balconies where the family elders are already whispering. He knows their intentions are obvious. They see him as a shiny new tool to be sharpened and used. He looks absolutely lethal in this moment, his violet eyes glowing with a quiet, dark resolve. One of the instructors spreads his arms wide, announcing a celebratory party for the new pure-blood awakeners. The other trainees immediately break into cheers and laughter, shouting Zeke's name like they weren't just calling him a trash brother yesterday. Talk about a complete 180. A bead of sweat rolls down Zeke's face as heavy, rhythmic footsteps echo through the silence. He didn't expect him to make an appearance so soon. A high-ranking officer in a black and red commander's uniform strides forward, the gold hilt of his sword clicking against his side. Reina Turin leans in, her crimson hair framing a gaze that feels like a lightning strike. "Congratulations," she says, her voice lacking any real warmth. She extends a black-gloved hand toward him, a gesture that feels more like a trap than a greeting. Zeke stares at her hand, knowing that showing even a hint of hostility now would ruin everything. He decides to play along for the cameras, but a sudden, visceral flash of a bloody battlefield hits him. He sees a future of piles of corpses and shattered stone, a reminder of the war he's desperately trying to prevent. The real game is finally starting. Reina Turin stares down at Zeke with a look that's half curiosity and half suspicion. She actually extends a hand for a shake, trying to bridge the gap between the legendary Lightning Knight and the boy who just shattered every expectation. But Zeke, he doesn't move a muscle, leaving her hand hanging in the dead air. Honestly, the sheer level of disrespect here is legendary. Reina's eyes narrow as she remarks on how awkward the situation has become. Zeke just stares right through her, his violet eyes cold and completely unyielding. In his head, the bitter truth comes out. There is no way he's shaking the hand of scum like her. He remembers exactly what she becomes in the future, and a polite handshake isn't going to erase that history. She finally pulls back, admitting she'll have to settle for just seeing his face for now. As she walks away, she throws a "see you again" over her shoulder that feels more like a threat than a goodbye. Zeke watches her retreating figure, his gaze never softening for even a second. You can practically feel the tension vibrating in the hallway. Zeke looks down at his own gloved hand, his breath hitching as the adrenaline from the right finally starts to dip. We transition to the grand, lit corridors of the estate where the atmosphere has completely shifted. The silence of the cradle is gone, replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. Everyone is looking for answers they don't have. High-ranking nobles and trainees are huddled in circles, whispering about the failed child who just performed a miracle. They were all prepared to mock his downfall, but now they're visibly shaken by his sudden rise. Zeke finally reaches the privacy of the inner halls and lets out a massive sigh of relief. He genuinely thought he was going to suffocate under the weight of all those judging eyes. Back in his private quarters, Zeke stands alone in the moonlight, reflecting on the power that just changed his destiny. It's the ultimate trump card, mana inhibition. This is the absolute signature of the Draker pureblood elite, allowing him to suppress the very mana of those around him. He didn't just survive the blessing rite, he became the apex predator of the household. An ornate chandelier glows with a faint, humming light. Zeke Draker stares up at it, realizing that in this world, even the decor is fueled by mana. It's a subtle reminder that power is everywhere, but as he pulls up his own status window, things get a lot more interesting. His screen flashes with a new title, the one who received the blessing of the ancient dragon. He's no longer just some kid, his class is now listed as immortal, and it's ranked as unique. Honestly, seeing a unique rank at age 12 is enough to make anyone's head spin. Zeke leans back, rubbing his chin as he scrolls through his new skills. He notices something called mana reflection, which is a massive upgrade from the standard mana inhibition most elites use. This skill creates a distortion field that literally nullifies any mana nearby. He compares this to his past life, where he was just a rare tier healer before the rite. Now, he's a unique immortal. The jump in power is so steep it's almost terrifying. It's like he went from carrying a pocket knife to wielding a literal nuke. Zeke clenches his jaw, his violet eyes shadowed by a growing realization. He remembers the other graduates. Their awakenings were all standard blue, nothing special. Even the legendary Reina Turin only managed a red, pure blood aura. But Zeke? His aura started red and then surged into a brilliant gold that defied every law the Drakers live by. Being different in a family of predators is usually a death sentence, but Zeke isn't afraid. He's just trying to figure out why the system couldn't handle his growth. A massive bronze statue looms in his memory, glowing with an angry, pulsating red light. This was the classification terminal, a machine designed to measure potential, and Zeke realized he actually broke the damn thing. The terminal lost all its data because it couldn't categorize a power as gold. Back in his private room, Zeke scratches his head, looking exhausted but focused. He finally understands why the elders were looking at him like he was a ghost. He didn't just pass the test, he destroyed the scale entirely. Red flames flicker as the testing terminal misreads Zeke's energy. This ancient bronze statue dates back to the family founder, Tarakan, but the current Drakers have no idea how it actually works. They've been mislabeling this red light as a rare class for years, completely blind to the fact that Zeke is something else entirely. It's actually kind of embarrassing how little they know about their own history. Zeke pulls up his status window while relaxing in his new, high-tier private room. He realizes he's accumulated a stack of karma points and decides it's finally time to see what he's actually working with. The system confirms his class as immortal, a unique rank that most people wouldn't even dream of. This is the moment where the gap between him and the other students becomes an absolute ocean. A list of legendary draconian skills appears, but one of them is a total head-scratcher. Devour apparently just lets him eat and digest huge amounts of food, which feels like a total ripoff for 50 points. He quickly bypasses the buffet-tier skills to unlock Dragon Eyes and Might of the Dragon instead. He's building a monster here, 1 point at a time. Magic circles rotate around Zeke's head as he triggers his new ability for the first time. His eye transforms into a piercing golden slit, looking exactly like a predator ready to strike. He glances around the luxury suite, but he's actually annoyed that the detailed information isn't as deep as he expected. Even with the eyes of a dragon, Zeke is still looking for a challenge that hasn't arrived yet. The hunt continues. Zeke stands by the open window, letting out a dry, incredulous laugh as he stares into the moonlit night. Even though the mansion garden is massive, he realizes he can see every individual leaf on the furthest trees as if they're inches from his face. This isn't just a simple buff. His eyes are literally ignoring the laws of physics and distance. Honestly, having this much sensory power in a 12-year-old body feels almost like cheating. A blue system window pops up, asking if Zeke wants detailed information on the objects he's detecting. He selects yes, and suddenly, he's bombarded with the historical lineage of every piece of furniture in the room, from Mycenaean candle stands to Laverne Dynasty desks. It's too much. His golden eye flares with a painful, predatory light, and he lets out a sharp gasp. It turns out, Dragon Eyes process way more data than a human brain can actually handle without a cost. Zeke stumbles back and collapses into a velvet chair, his body trembling from the sudden, massive mana drain. These draconian skills are absolute mana hogs. Just one use of his sight nearly puts him in the dirt. But then, 2 more screens flash. Healing factor and vigor recovery have automatically kicked in. Zeke looks down at his hands, confused, because he didn't even try to activate a healing spell. It's like the system is a sentient bodyguard forcing him to stay at peak condition. Zeke stares blankly at a bowl of fruit on the table while his passive skills rapidly repair the strain on his nervous system. A new notification confirms his skill levels just jumped up by 1, simply because they're constantly running in the background to keep him alive. He mutters that this is completely broken. If he's already this overpowered while just sitting in a chair, what happens when he actually starts a real fight? The gap between him and the rest of the world just became a bottomless abyss. A warrior collapses under a hail of swords, illustrating the fatal flaw of standard healers. Zeke knows a normal, rare healer can't spam their skills and has a hard cap on how much they can actually mend. But he's not normal anymore. Zeke leans forward in his chair, wondering if his new status makes his regeneration truly infinite. He mutters a quiet, phew, preparing himself for a test that most sane people would avoid. Honestly, if he's right about this, the world's rules just stopped applying to him. A sharp blade bites into Zeke's skin, and a heavy drop of blood hits the floor with a distinct "kachuk." He doesn't even flinch as he intentionally wounds himself to see how the system reacts. Instantly, a blue window flares to life, healing factor activated. The gash on his arm doesn't just close, it vanishes in a blur of mana. Seeing a wound that should take days to heal disappear in seconds is terrifying. That's not just magic, it's a total cheat code. Zeke sits at a lavish table, looking out over his temporary sanctuary within the estate. He realizes he has exactly 5 years before the real chaos of his memories begins. A dark, sharp smirk spreads across his face as the weight of his advantage finally sinks in. He's not just surviving anymore, he's planning a total takeover. It's almost unfair for everyone else, isn't it? The grand spires of the Dronzer Academy stretch toward the sky, looking more like a fortress than a school. This is the meat grinder, where the family's elite are forged, and a new semester is just about to kick off. Thousands of students are arriving for the spring term, completely unaware that a monster is already sitting in their midst. The game has officially changed, and these kids have no idea who they're about to go to class with. A group of high-ranked students laugh and gossip as they walk through the academy. Zeke watches them with a cold gaze, realizing these kids are already acting like the corrupt, power-hungry adults he remembers from his past life. They've established their own little hierarchy before the first bell even rings. Honestly, seeing them play pretend at being elites is just nauseating. The crests of the great families, the Turuan of Strength and the Vardek of Gold, appear in the background. These are the massive branch families that hold up the Dronzer name, filled with trainees who have been polished to perfection since birth. It's a literal ocean of influence and raw power. But looking at them, you have to wonder, how many of these golden children will actually survive a real battlefield? Zeke lets out a sharp, cynical smirk as he cuts through the crowd. He treats their stares like static noise, his eyes fixed on the massive, ivory tower looming ahead of him. This is the Platinum Mansion, the most exclusive dormitory in the entire academy grounds. It's a place built for the best of the best, and Zeke is heading straight for the front door. The interior reveals a sprawling private library and high-end training facilities reserved only for the top rankers. Most students at the cradle would kill for just a glimpse of this luxury, but for Zeke, it's just a standard requirement. Because he's a pure-blood awakener, the academy grants him the status of floor master. He now has an entire floor of this fortress to himself. It's total isolation, and for a predator like Zeke, that's the perfect place to start sharpening his claws for revenge. Zeke walks down a plush, red-carpeted hallway while an escort leads the way to his new private quarters. As he nears the entrance, a row of servants bows in perfect, terrifying unison, greeting him as the new master of the floor. It's a complete 180 from his life as a parasite, and the sudden shift in status is almost deafening. The head butler leans in close, informing Zeke that his cousin Decker is already inside waiting for him. Zeke pushes open the heavy doors to find a room so massive and opulent it looks more like a king's lounge than a student dormitory. Even for a Dronzer, this level of luxury is reserved for the absolute peak of the hierarchy. Decker stands by a heavy, reinforced chest, looking visibly stunned by the high-grade equipment the academy has prepared. Zeke barely spares him a glance, instead focusing on the feel of his new combat gloves and deciding right then that he needs a new sword to match. He knows his current strength requires a blade that won't shatter the moment he gets serious. The butler bows, praising Zeke's initiative and mentioning that the surrounding mountains are famous for producing world-class iron. We see a glimpse of the jagged, or rich peaks where the finest craftsmen in the empire toil away. For most, getting a custom blade from these smiths is a pipe dream, but for Zeke, it's just another Tuesday. The butler offers to begin a search for a decent craftsman, but Zeke is already one step ahead, pulling out a pen and paper. He doesn't need a decent smith. He needs the specific legendary figure he remembers from his past life. He starts writing with a focused, clinical intensity that catches the staff off guard. Zeke hands over a folded note with a sharp, confident smirk, his eyes glowing with a predatory violet light. The butler accepts the task, promising to make contact immediately while reminding Zeke that his first actual classes begin tomorrow. The peaceful days of the academy are officially over. The hunt is finally moving into its next phase. Sunlight streams through the ornate windows of a massive luxury suite. Now that the dust has settled, Zeke is finally moved to the platinum floor, a place so isolated that the servant's constant nagging is the only thing he has to worry about. It's the perfect setup, total privacy to develop his draconian heart without any prying eyes. Honestly, being the family's new golden boy has its perks when you're hiding world-ending secrets. A sharp knock at the door interrupts his thoughts as a submissive maid enters. She brings word that Reyna Turin, the legendary Lightning Knight herself, has already sent a formal inquiry. Zeke's violet eyes narrow as he processes the news. He knew she was sharp, but she's moving way faster than he anticipated. It makes you wonder, what exactly did she see in him during that rite? Zeke stands on his balcony, staring down at the sprawling academy grounds like a king surveying a tiny kingdom. Down below, the average trainees are still grinding away, completely unaware that the hierarchy of the cradle just got flipped on its head. One of the older students catches a glimpse of him and scoffs, calling Zeke's new status cute. Yeah, keep that same energy when he's standing over you in the arena. A group of high-ranking students stands at attention as Zeke descends, greeting him with forced, plastic smiles. They try to play the "Welcome to the Elite" card, but Zeke just brushes past them with a dry, "Thanks for your concern." He sees right through them. They aren't peers, they're just vultures waiting for him to trip. Dealing with these fake prodigies is already becoming a total headache. In a quiet corner of the archives, Reyna Turin is surrounded by a terrifying aura of blue electricity while she pores over an ancient tome. Zeke realizes she's already set her sights on the position of the Purple Knight, the absolute peak of the family's power structure. He lets out a heavy sigh, muttering that it's a complete waste of her potential. But what does he know about that seat that the rest of the world has forgotten? The real game is only just beginning. Zeke lets out a dry laugh as he stares at the mountain of empty plates before him. He's been eating like a monster, clearing stack after stack of food to fuel a body that's practically screaming for mana. He admits he's a big eater, but this is way beyond his expectations for a 12-year-old. Once the table is finally cleared, he wipes his mouth and locks eyes with his guest. It's time to move past the small talk and get down to business. A high-ranking academy official leans in, claiming Zeke has a massive misunderstanding about how pure-blood awakeners actually work. He explains that while the Draker name comes with insane privileges, those perks don't actually translate to physical growth. Papers and documents scatter in Zeke's mind as the man explains the need for know-how and personal instructors to effectively raise one's abilities. It's a sophisticated gatekeeping system designed to keep the weak from ever catching up. Honestly, it's just another way for the elite to stay ahead of the curve. The official brings up Abel Draker, the youngest white knight in history, noting that even he needed the support of a maternal family to succeed. He reveals that the patriarch of the Turin family, Reyna's family, has reached out with a massive offer. He looks Zeke dead in the eye and tells him to accept the Turin family's support immediately. This is a golden ticket that would make any other trainee the most protected kid in the cradle. But what is the catch for shaking hands with the Lightning Knight's kin? Zeke doesn't even blink as he drops a single, icy word, no. The official's face completely short-circuits, his eyes going wide with total disbelief. He was expecting Zeke to jump at the chance, but instead, he's met with a wall of pure defiance. Zeke isn't here to be some family's trophy or a puppet for the higher-ups. The look of utter shock on the official's face is priceless, but Zeke's already moving on to the next move. This rejection is going to send shockwaves through the entire academy. Zeke's gloved hand rests firmly on the table as he delivers a cold reality check. He tells the stunned official that he doesn't need anything beyond his basic rights as a pure-blood awakener. Without waiting for a response, Zeke turns and walks across the wide courtyard, leaving the man behind. Honestly, seeing him walk away like he owns the place after being treated like trash is incredibly satisfying. Zeke looks back with those sharp, violet eyes as he analyzes his own combat style. He realizes his swordplay has been relying way too much on brute force lately. As green leaves swirl around him in a mental training space, he reminds himself that his greatest weapon is actually fluidity. If he keeps trying to tank hits head-on, he's going to hit a wall. He needs to move like water, not a brick wall. A gloved hand reaches out, gently brushing aside falling leaves to illustrate the point. The goal isn't to crush the opponent's strength with his own, but to fluidly cast their attacks aside. It's a high-level concept that most trainees his age wouldn't even grasp. But Zeke isn't a normal kid. He's a man with a lifetime of regrets and a second chance to get it right. The vision fades as Zeke focuses on the end goal, becoming several times stronger than his current self. He clenches his fist tightly, the leather of his glove creaking as he thinks about the Turin family. They're known as the heralds of strength, and Zeke is done just following anyone's lead. He's carving his own path now, and heaven help anyone who stands in his way. The question is, who's going to be the first to test his new philosophy? Zeke clenches his gloved fist tightly against his chest. He realizes that his Northern Phantom persona from his past life was unintentionally bleeding into his current sword techniques. It's a haunting realization, even in this younger body, he's still carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. Honestly, it's a bit terrifying how much of that old monster remains. Zeke holds a delicate green leaf between his fingers. With a surgical flick, he slices it perfectly in half without even using a blade. Back then, everyone called him a genius, but they were too scared to actually give him real advice. He was a master of a lonely path, and it looks like that hasn't changed. The severed leaf flutters to the ground as Zeke stares into the distance. He questions his own identity, wondering if he's becoming something even he doesn't recognize. But there's no time for an identity crisis when you have a family to dismantle. The game is just getting started. Zeke walks through the academy gardens as the morning sun breaks. He's been training since the sun went down, yet he's not even breathing hard. A blue system window reveals the reason. He's unlocked infinite stamina as a passive ability. Any fatigue he builds up is instantly offset, making his potential for growth literally limitless. A student in the background mutters that money and power aren't everything. Zeke doesn't even spare him a glance as he walks past the other trainees struggling through their morning laps. They're exhausted, while he's just warming up for a war they aren't even aware of yet. He's moving toward a future they can't even see. Zeke's name cuts through the crisp morning air like a blade, forcing him to glance back over his shoulder. A group of trainees is marching toward him in formation, their eyes locked onto the boy who just flipped the academy's power structure on its head. You can practically feel the jealousy radiating off them. They see a 12-year-old floor master and think he's an easy target. Honestly, watching these amateurs try to intimidate a regressor is like watching a kitten try to stare down a tiger. A dark memory of Owen Zimmons flashes by, reminding Zeke of the noble hierarchy that once treated him like absolute trash in his first life. Apparently, Zeke was supposed to show up to some elite dinner last night, but he left the formal invitation gathering dust on his desk without a second thought. He gives them this tiny, mocking smile that says their great family status is worth less than the paper it's printed on. It's a bold move considering he's technically in exile, but Zeke is playing a game they can't even comprehend yet. The lead trainee's lip curls into a sneer as he calls Zeke funny, his ego clearly reaching its breaking point. Zeke stays perfectly still, his violet eyes tracking every micro-movement as he begins to cycle his mana in preparation for the inevitable surge. Suddenly, a foot stomps down with enough force to crack the stone, sending a shockwave through the courtyard. The trap is officially set, and this inflexible senior just walked right into the kill zone. The air turns heavy as the trainee screams Zeke's name in a blind rage, but Zeke just stares back with a look of total, crushing indifference. He casually asks, "Who are you?" And the guy's face turns a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible. Zeke sighs, looking like he'd rather be taking a nap than dealing with a lackey trying to look good for his young master. But as that violet mana starts to swirl and the first strike is thrown, it's clear the talking is over. This isn't a spar, it's a veteran showing a child why you never, ever underestimate a Draker. What happens next is going to leave the entire academy in silence. A bright flash of blue light tears across the screen as the fight finally kicks off. Durbin Roswell lunges forward with a cocky grin, clearly thinking his superior size and experience will end this in seconds. But Zeke just stands there, watching the trajectory with the bored eyes of a man who's fought literal gods. It's almost painful watching this kid try so hard against someone who's already lived through a war. Speech bubbles fill the air as Durbin announces his name, calling himself Durbin the Mighty, to the entire courtyard. He's putting on a show for the young master, trying to solidify his status by crushing the new floor master. Zeke just tilts his head, repeating the title back with a voice dripping in pure sarcasm. Durbin the Mighty? Seriously, the second a guy gives himself a nickname like that, you know he's about to get humbled. A sharp white streak cuts through the air as Zeke finally makes his move. He doesn't waste energy on flashy footwork. He simply slides into Durbin's blind spot, his own violet mana beginning to hiss and crackle like a waking dragon. Durbin's eyes go wide as he realizes his target isn't where it should be. The predator just became the prey, and the look of sheer panic on Durbin's face says it all. A fist glowing with concentrated violet energy slams into the target with the force of a falling star. The impact is so violent it sends a spray of blood arching through the air, followed by a massive crack as Durbin is plowed into the stone floor. It wasn't even a fight. It was a professional execution. The dust cloud settles, leaving nothing but silence and the smell of ozone. Zeke stands over the cratered mess of his opponent, his violet eyes glowing with a cold, predatory intensity. He calmly looks around the crowd of terrified trainees and asks, "So, who's next?" The sheer aura he's projecting right now is suffocating, and you can see the young master in the background looking like he's just seen a ghost. Zeke isn't just a trainee anymore. He's the apex predator of this academy. A new student with light brown hair walks forward, seemingly unaffected by the carnage. He tells Zeke that he sure likes to bask in his own glory, throwing a new wave of tension over the courtyard. This guy isn't shaking like the others, which usually means one of two things: he's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. But as Zeke turns to face him, the real question is, how much more can Zeke's 12-year-old body actually take before it snaps? Zeke looks down at the sea of trainees from his position of power. While these kids are patting themselves on the back for making it into the academy, Zeke just thinks the whole thing is a total joke. He explains the brutal hierarchy here. You have the normal class, where those without natural talent grind from dawn till dusk just to stay relevant. Then you have the special class, the place for the absolute elite of the elite who get to pick their own path. Honestly, seeing them act so proud of their effort just highlights how far behind they really are compared to a regressor. Zeke sits in a massive lecture hall, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Even though he's technically in the special class, to him, this is nothing more than the cradle, a literal nursery for children who don't know the first thing about real war. The other students are sitting straight, hanging on to every word, but Zeke is just leaning back with a look of pure boredom. It's funny how the top tier of this generation looks like amateurs to a guy who's already seen the end of the world. The instructor at the front of the room announces that someone very special has arrived to encourage the freshmen today. The entire room erupts in cheers, with students jumping out of their seats to catch a glimpse of a living legend. The name that drops is Howard Draker, the Command-in-Chief and Dean of the Academy. Everyone is losing their minds, thinking they're about to meet a god among men. But as Zeke watches the door, his eyes aren't filled with admiration, they're filled with ice. Flames and chaos fill Zeke's mind as the public's image of Howard as a war hero is shoved in our faces. The world thinks this man saved the empire through sheer resourcefulness, but Zeke knows the disgusting truth. Howard didn't save anyone on purpose. He was a coward who leaked top-secret info to the enemy just to save his own pathetic skin, and it only turned into a victory by pure, dumb luck. As Howard stands before the class, Zeke stares at the back of the man's head, remembering the exact moment this hero got him exiled in his past life. This isn't a guest lecture, it's a reunion with the rat who destroyed his future. And you just know Zeke isn't going to let him get away with it twice. Dark, jagged silhouettes of slave traders loom in a cold flashback. Zeke recalls being exiled from his home and sold like property in his original timeline after losing everything. It's a heavy, suffocating memory for a 12-year-old to carry, but it fuels his current focus. He stares at the back of Howard's head, making a silent promise to pay every bit of that misery back with interest. Honestly, you can almost feel the chill coming off him. Zeke's eyes narrow into a sharp glare as he clenches his jaw. The dean's speech finally ends, and the cadets are ordered to grab their swords and head straight to the arena for basic training. A massive, stone-tiled courtyard soon fills with rows of students standing in perfect formation under the afternoon sun. It looks impressive to an outsider, but to a veteran like Zeke, this is just a playground for children who haven't seen a real day of war yet. Zeke stands among the crowd, looking completely out of place with his intense, unblinking focus. He reflects on his past life, where he had to crawl for every inch of progress, taking 2 years to learn basics that others mastered in mere months. That history of struggle is exactly what makes him so dangerous now. He isn't just a regressor with a cheat code, he's a man who knows the agonizing value of every single drop of sweat. A blonde-haired man in a high-collared black and gold uniform steps forward to address the formation. He introduces himself as Andre Draker, the instructor for dragon-slaying basics. The guy radiates a level of sharp authority that immediately shuts every single cadet up. You can tell right away that this isn't some mid-level knight. He's a predator standing among prey. Intimidated whispers ripple through the ranks as the trainees recognize the man standing before them. This is Andre, the legendary Rose Knight, a once-in-a-century genius who was so talented he was actually awarded the prestigious Draker family name. As Andre looks over the new batch of cadets with an unforgiving gaze, Zeke just watches him, completely unfazed. He knows that in this world, titles don't mean a thing if you can't back them up once the swords are drawn. Zeke wears a smug, knowing grin as the atmosphere around the training ground suddenly turns suffocatingly heavy. Andre is famous for having absolutely zero chill, and he's already living up to that inflexible reputation by leaking a terrifying amount of raw bloodlust. Most of these trainees are probably wishing they were anywhere else right now, but Zeke just stands there, completely unbothered by the pressure. Andre cuts through the nervous chatter and commands every cadet to draw their steel to begin the session immediately. But as the other trainees unsheath their standard-issue blades, Andre's gaze locks onto Zeke with a mix of confusion and pure irritation. He demands to know what kind of ridiculous, oversized sword Zeke is trying to carry into a serious military class. Zeke casually maneuvers a massive broadsword that looks twice as large as it should be for a 12-year-old small frame. He's swinging the mountain of steel with such fluid, effortless precision that the air literally whistles, creating a sharp arc of mana pressure. It's a total power move. He's making a heavy-duty veteran's weapon look like a featherweight toy just to prove a point. Zeke just gives a casual shrug, telling the instructor that it's simply the weapon he's decided to use for the day. Andre isn't amused at all and sternly reminds him that a true warrior must pick a weapon that actually suits their physical build and limitations. In Andre's eyes, Zeke is just another arrogant noble kid who hasn't even learned the basics of balance or equipment. Zeke hides a smirk, secretly pleased that his plan to stand out and bait the instructor worked exactly as he intended. He looks Andre dead in the eye with a bored expression and drops the ultimate bomb. He's sure he could beat the instructor even with this oversized blade. You can practically feel the air leave the room after a flex like that. He's basically asking for a beatdown. Andre's eyes glow with a dangerous, predatory red light as his mana begins to flare up in response to the blatant disrespect. He steps directly into the arena, calmly telling Zeke that he understands and accepts the terms of the challenge. This escalated way faster than anyone expected, and it looks like Zeke is about to get exactly what he wanted, a real fight with a legend. Zeke's eyes narrow with a sharp, calculating glint. Andre just stepped right into the trap, and Zeke's internal monologue says it all. He bit. Andre's hand drops to the hilt of his blade, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble as he tells Zeke that if he survives this, he won't just be exempt from punishment for his rudeness, he'll prove he belongs here. Honestly, it's a classic vet move, using intimidation to crush a rookie's spirit. A thick, suffocating red aura begins to bleed out of Andre, staining the very air. This isn't just mana, it's pure, refined killing intent that feels heavy enough to crack the pavement. It's the kind of pressure that makes most trainees pass out before a sword is even drawn. But then we see the title card, and you know things are about to get serious when the music would usually swell right about now. Andre stands shrouded in that crimson mist, looking less like an instructor and more like a demonic executioner. His eyes glow with a piercing red light as he adds one more stake to the bet, Zeke's spot in the dragon-slaying arts class. He's basically saying, show me your worth, or your career ends today. The tension is through the roof. How is Zeke supposed to counter a literal monster like this? Zeke just stands there, totally relaxed, which is honestly the most terrifying thing in the room. He's not even planning on using his aura against the cadets because he doesn't need to. He knows Andre's weakness from his original timeline. It's that veteran battle IQ kicking in. Zeke isn't fighting the man in front of him. He's fighting a memory he's already picked apart 1,000 times. A massive, shadowy silhouette of Andre looms over Zeke like a mountain about to crumble, but Zeke is already 3 steps ahead. He realizes that if he wins too convincingly, he'll draw way too much heat from the higher-ups. So, he comes up with a wild plan. He's just going to graze his clothes, and then take a dive to lose on purpose. Wait, is he seriously going to troll a high-ranking knight just to stay under the radar? That is some next-level disrespect. A sharp streak of violet mana carves through the air as Zeke initiates his opening move. He's suppressing his true output to avoid a literal murder charge, yet the residual pressure of his draconian mana makes the very air feel heavy and suffocating for everyone watching. The senior trainee barely has time to register the blur before Zeke is already repositioning, circling him like a violet ghost. It's like watching a seasoned predator play with its food before the actual kill. I almost feel bad for the guy. He really walked into this thinking he was the one in control. Red sparks erupt from a heavy clash of steel that echoes across the entire training grounds. The senior is gasping for air, forced to acknowledge that Zeke is moving with a refined grace that should be impossible for a 12-year-old body. Zeke's eyes flare with a cold, piercing red light as he activates his mana, turning the courtyard into a suffocating cage of killing intent. The area is now a mess of afterimages and mana trails as the floor master dictates every single microsecond of the engagement. This isn't a struggle for Zeke. It's a masterclass in total, undisputed dominance. The surrounding trainees watch in a paralyzed, stunned silence as the fight drags past the 30-minute mark. They're whispering in disbelief because the senior hasn't even managed to graze a single thread of Zeke's uniform despite throwing everything he has into his attacks. Just look at the senior's hands. They're trembling so violently he can't even maintain a proper grip on his sword hilt anymore. He's internally screaming, wondering how a child could possibly possess such an absurd, bottomless pit of stamina. It's the terrifying look of a man who just realized he's not fighting a student, but a monster. A shadow of pure, bitter frustration crosses the senior's face as his military pride finally hits rock bottom. He's spiraling into a mental breakdown, cursing the unfair, genetic gap of the purebloods while Zeke just watches him with those cold, violet eyes. Zeke doesn't give him a single moment to recover his breath, closing the distance with a finality that feels like a death sentence. The atmosphere itself seems to buckle and snap under the weight of Zeke's concentrated power as he prepares the finishing blow. Honestly, the look of pure despair on that guy's face is the most satisfying part of this whole lopsided beatdown. Zeke's violet eyes narrow as he maintains a suffocating level of restraint. He's intentionally suppressing his own mana to keep this duel from turning into a murder scene, but the physical toll is starting to show. At the cradle, trainees are taught to keep their aura active 24/7, even while eating or sleeping, so for Zeke to shut his down completely is like trying to run a marathon while holding his breath. It's a high-level flex that's actually making the fight harder for himself than it needs to be. Honestly, the level of mental discipline required to hold back that much power is just terrifying. Blades grind together in a shower of sparks as Zeke shifts his weight. He's utilizing unconventional swordsmanship that completely ignores standard academy forms, which is draining his 12-year-old body's stamina at an alarming rate. Andre, the senior trainee, is visibly spiraling, his pride taking a massive hit as he realizes he can't land a single clean strike. He's supposed to be the superior fighter here, but he's being danced around by a kid who hasn't even drawn his aura yet. You can almost see the gears turning in Andre's head. He's realizing that losing like this would be a total disgrace. Andre's eyes glow with a desperate, red intensity as he decides to stop playing nice. He realizes there's no way to win through skill alone, so he resolves to force Zeke into a corner where he has to activate his aura. He lunges forward with a strike meant to create a kill or be killed scenario, sending shockwaves through the courtyard as the ground beneath them begins to crack. He thinks he's being clever by forcing Zeke's hand. But seriously, does he really think he's prepared for what's behind that door? Zeke goes completely inverted, dodging the lethal arc of Andre's blade with a mid-air flip that defies gravity. The moment the extreme situation Andre wanted actually arrives, Zeke's veteran instincts take the wheel, and the atmosphere in the arena shifts from a sparring match to a hunt. Zeke lands with a heavy thud, his silhouette blurring as he prepares to unleash a concentrated burst of his signature violet draconian mana. Andre wanted to see the floor master's true power. Well, he's about to get exactly what he asked for, and I have a feeling he's going to regret it immediately. A streak of jagged violet mana tears through the air, catching the light like shattered glass. Andre's eyes practically pop out of his head as he realizes he's not looking at a lucky kid, but a predator. He stammers out, swift steps, just as Zeke's movement becomes a chaotic blur of purple energy trails. Honestly, seeing a 12-year-old move like a high-tier assassin would make anyone's heart skip a beat. Zeke stands cloaked in dark, flickering violet flames as a system notification confirms, critical strike has been activated. Andre is spiraling now, his internal monologue screaming about how a mere cadet could possibly master legendary footwork. His own eyes glow a desperate, blood red as he forces his mana to keep up, but he's already 3 steps behind. You can see the pure terror setting in. He finally understands he's outclassed. A trail of rainbow-colored afterimages follows Zeke as he carves a path through the courtyard. This isn't just a spar anymore, it's the debut of the Dragon-Slaying Arts, Chapter 1. As the first verse begins, Zeke's blade isn't just glowing, it's screaming with electric blue energy that looks like it could split the world. The crazy part is, Zeke looks completely bored while doing it, like he's just taking out the trash. The words, "Sky Slice," dominate the air as Zeke prepares to drop the hammer. His gaze is absolute ice, focused entirely on the point of impact as the blue energy reaches a breaking point. Then, the entire scene whites out in a massive, floor-shattering explosion of mana. It's a total overkill, leaving the audience paralyzed in silence. But as the smoke clears, a huge question remains. Can Zeke's 12-year-old body actually survive the recoil of a move that powerful? We're about to find out the hard way. A massive shockwave ripples through the air as the opponent's face contorts in absolute terror. The explosion of mana Zeke unleashed wasn't just a hit, it was a total surge of power that left the entire training ground trembling in silence. Zeke grips his sword hilt tightly through the rising dust, his knuckles turning white from the strain. Even with blood trickling down his chin, he flashes a chilling, jagged smile and admits to himself that it really hurts. Honestly, seeing a 12-year-old grin like a maniac while his body is literally breaking from his own power is genuinely terrifying. Zeke slumps forward, using his heavy blade as a makeshift crutch just to stay upright amidst the settling smoke. Behind him, a massive, jagged crater carves a path through the stone floor, a silent testament to the unique, level mana he just forced out. The surrounding trainees can only stare, paralyzed, as the dust settles around the sheer scale of the destruction. He's barely holding it together, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but his grip on that hilt doesn't waver for a second. It's clear he's pushed his current vessel to the absolute limit for this victory. An instructor watches the aftermath from the shadows, his back turned as he delivers a heavy verdict to the room. He mutters that this cadet, Zeke Draker, doesn't need to attend normal classes anymore because there's simply nothing left to teach him here. This isn't a graduation, it's a recognition that Zeke is a predator walking among sheep. The rest of the trainees look like they've seen a ghost, their faces pale and eyes wide with a new, paralyzing kind of fear. They realize now that the Floor Master title wasn't just a lucky break, it was a warning. A high-ranking senior stands with his eyes glowing a menacing, activated red, his voice cold as he declares he'll assume there are no more challengers to Zeke's status. But the damage is done, the legend of the true Draker is already spreading like wildfire through the Academy's halls. The scene shifts abruptly to the sterile, oppressive quiet of the Academy infirmary, where Zeke lies hooked up to an 4. He's staring blankly at the ceiling, reflecting on how he won without even grazing the other boy's clothes. He's a monster trapped in a fragile shell, and the real question is, how much longer can his 12-year-old body hold back the tide of his own legendary soul before it completely shatters? Zeke lies flat on his back, staring at the ceiling as the dust from the arena finally settles. He manages a smirk because he actually forced the legendary Rose Knight to break his own rule and use aura against a child. For Zeke, this is a total win. He disciplined Andre and earned some much-needed free time. Honestly, seeing a 12-year-old this smug after nearly dying is pretty wild. Zeke's violet eyes narrow as he replays that final, crushing exchange in his head. Andre's last attack wasn't some complex secret technique, it was the most fundamental move of the dragon-slaying arts. It's the basics that usually kill you, and Zeke knows it. A blinding pillar of light erupts as we see the sky slice in its terrifying glory. Zeke looks almost possessed, his eyes glowing with an intense, haunting light as he reflects on the first verse. You can practically feel the air pressure through the screen. The arena floor shatters under the weight of the Blue Knight's incredible force. Even though the impact was devastating, Zeke remains eerily calm. He's convinced he can beat a high-tier knight because his healing factor makes him a literal cheat code. But is he getting too comfortable? A single feather drifts downward as Zeke reflects on his current limits. Even with a god-tier healing factor, he realizes he's still a bird in a cage if he can't protect his freedom. He's craving a power so absolute that no one can force him to submit. It's a heavy thought for a 12-year-old, but remember, he's a regressor who knows exactly how cruel this world can be. A scruffy man with a bottle leans over the bed. Zeke snaps awake to find a stranger hovering way too close for comfort. This guy is literally drinking while watching a kid recover, calling him Arthur's youngest son. Talk about a creepy first impression. Honestly, if I woke up to this, I'd be swinging immediately. Zeke stares up in pure shock at the man looming over his hospital bed. He's still hooked up to N4, completely vulnerable, while the stranger, Andre Draker, towers over him. Andre mentions that Zeke has the same eyes as his arrogant father, Arthur. This isn't just a friendly check-in, it's a predator scouting his prey. Why is he looking at a kid with that much intensity? Andre grins while clutching a bottle, calling Zeke's father an arrogant bastard. Zeke is paralyzed. How did he not sense this man entering the room when he reeks of booze? He finally finds his voice to ask who this intruder actually is. This guy is dangerous, and he clearly knows way too much. Andre ignores the question, leaning in to ask how Zeke pulled off that stunt in the arena. He takes a massive swig of liquor, acting like he owns the place while Zeke watches him warily. When Zeke tries to play dumb, Andre just scoffs. He's not buying the innocent kid act for a single second. Andre points toward Zeke, reminding him of the internal damage he suffered during the duel. He saw the blood and the broken state of Zeke's body, yet here Zeke is, looking perfectly fine. Andre leans in, his eyes sharp, asking how a wound like that heals instantly. Zeke's heart sinks, the secret of his healing factor is out. He's been caught by the worst person possible. A blue system window flickers as Zeke's indomitable mental defense activates. He's panicking internally because Andre just name-dropped the healing factor, a secret that should be impossible for anyone at the academy to know. Zeke tells himself to stay calm. If he flinches now, the game is over. Zeke looks Andre dead in the eye and claims he has no idea what the man is talking about. Andre just smirks, calling Zeke's bluff a pathetic charade while looming over the infirmary bed. This guy is way too observant for comfort. Zeke's pupils shrink as a sharp blue streak blurs past his eyes. Andre moves with terrifying speed, his hand cutting through the air toward Zeke's throat before the kid can even blink. He's done talking. Now he's testing Zeke's survival instincts with pure violence. White feathers explode everywhere as Zeke is blasted off the bed, tumbling through the air in total shock. He momentarily wonders if an assassin has breached the room, but it's just Andre's overwhelming pressure pinning him into the corner. Honestly, Zeke is officially fighting for his life in a hospital ward. Andre lunges forward with a speed that blurs the entire room. Zeke barely has time to gasp as the white cloak sweeps past his vision, forcing him into a desperate defensive scramble. This isn't a training exercise anymore. Andre is moving with genuine predatory intent. Zeke's mind races as his instincts scream at him to move or die. Honestly, seeing a veteran like Andre go full throttle against a kid is chilling. Blue system windows flash rapidly, signaling the activation of swift steps and precise stab. Zeke is stacking every single skill in his arsenal just to stay ahead of the blade. But the big question is, can his battered body even handle this much mana pressure? Zeke flips through the air, his silhouette wreathed in a violent purple ether. He grips his sword with white-knuckled intensity, his thoughts turning dark and decisive. He realizes that if he doesn't fight with the intent to kill, Andre is actually going to end him right here. Andre's gloved hands reach out through the floating debris, tracking Zeke's mid-air rotation. A sharp tink echoes as their weapons finally meet in the cramped room. It's officially a do-or-die moment. Zeke's fingers twitch as he barely catches the next strike. Andre looms over him, admitting that Zeke's ability to adapt to a life-or-death situation is actually impressive. It's a compliment that feels more like a death sentence. The instructor's cloak billows as he pivots with a jagged grin. Andre laughs, saying Zeke fights less like a student and almost like a veteran mercenary. He's basically stripping away Zeke's mask, piece by piece, and he's loving every second of it. Red light flares in Andre's eyes as his killing intent hits its peak. Zeke is frozen for a split second, staring at the monster before him and wondering who the hell this man really is. This isn't just an instructor anymore, it's a predator who has finally smelled blood.